ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into the last part of the series. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Early morning light stretched across the quiet beach, the waves rolling in with a steady rhythm that made everything feel slower for a moment. The air was cool, carrying that faint salty smell that always lingered near the water. Izuku stood near the edge of the sand in simple clothes, a fitted tank top and dark pants that showed off how much his body had changed. His posture was a little tense, hands in his pockets, eyes focused on the horizon like he was trying to sort through everything at once. Footsteps approached from behind. Toshinori Yagi walked up beside him in his skinny form, adjusting his ties slightly as he stopped. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with him, looking out at the ocean. For a few seconds, it was just the sound of the waves and the wind moving past them. Then Toshinori spoke. Toshinori Yagi quietly. I heard. Izuku didn't look at him right away. Izuku Midoriya soft. Yeah. Another short silence passed. Then Toshinori stepped forward and pulled him into a hug. Izuku froze for a second, caught off guard, but then slowly relaxed into it. The grip wasn't strong. Toshinori didn't have the strength for that in this form, but it was steady and real. Toshinori Yagi gentle. Fear is a powerful thing. Izuku's eyes lowered slightly. Toshinori Yagi calm. Your mother is not wrong for feeling it. Izuku swallowed. Izuku Midoriya quiet. I know. Toshinori pulled back slightly, resting a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Toshinori Yagi serious, but neither are you. Izuku finally looked up at him. Toshinori Yagi soft. What you chose at USJ, that was the act of a true hero. Izuku's chest tightened a little. Izuku Midoriya low. It didn't feel heroic. Toshinori smiled faintly. Toshinori Yagi calm. It rarely does. The wind picked up slightly, rustling their clothes as the waves crashed a bit louder against the shore. Toshinori Yagi steady. You stood in front of something that should have killed you, and you didn't run. He looked directly at Izuku. Toshinori Yagi firm. You protected others when it mattered most. Izuku clenched his hand slightly at his side. Izuku Midoriya quiet. But I hurt her. Toshinori didn't look away. Toshinori Yagi honest. Yes. Izuku flinched slightly at the direct answer. Toshinori Yagi gentle. And that will take time to fix. He rested his hand more firmly on Izuku's shoulder. Toshinori Yagi reassuring. But you are not alone in this. Izuku blinked. Toshinori Yagi calm. If you need guidance, support, anything at all. A small smile formed on his face. Toshinori Yagi warm. I am here. Izuku looked at him for a second, then let out a quiet breath he didn't realize he was holding. Izuku Midoriya soft. Thank you. Toshinori nodded once. Then his expression shifted slightly. Toshinori Yagi focused. Now. Izuku straightened instinctively. Toshinori Yagi serious. Tell me everything about this evolution of One for All. Izuku blinked. Then his usual spark came back just a little. Izuku Midoriya nervous, but excited. Okay, so. The two of them moved a little farther down the beach, away from the walkway, where the sand was softer and the sound of the waves filled the space between their words. Izuku was already talking, hands moving as he tried to explain everything clearly, though his thoughts were still coming out faster than he could organize them. Izuku Midoriya thinking out loud. It's hard to explain exactly, but it just feels different now. He looked down at his hands for a second, flexing his fingers slightly. Izuku Midoriya focused. Before, One for All felt like this huge weight I had to control. Like I was holding back something that could break me at any second. He looked back up at Toshinori. Izuku Midoriya serious, but now it feels stable. Toshinori listened carefully, not interrupting. Izuku Midoriya continuing. It's still powerful, like really powerful, but it's not fighting me as much anymore. It's like it's synced with me better. He scratched his cheek, trying to find the right words. Izuku Midoriya awkward. I don't know if that makes sense. Tashinori nodded slightly. Tashinori Yagi calm. It does. Izuku let out a small breath and kept going. Izuku Midoriya explaining. And then there's the vestiges. Nana, Yoichi, they were really clear about it. He hesitated for a second. Izuku Midoriya quiet. I already told you, but I can access their quirks now. Tashinori's eyes narrowed slightly, still processing that part. Izuku Midoriya quickly. And one for all can't be passed on anymore. They said it's reached its limit. He looked down again, his voice dropping slightly. Izuku Midoriya soft. I'm the last one. The waves crashed again, filling the silence for a moment. Izuku shifted his weight a little, rubbing the back of his neck. Izuku Midoriya awkward laugh, which is kind of a lot when you think about it. Tashinori didn't say anything yet, letting him continue. Izuku Midoriya quiet. And then there's the new part. He glanced aside. Izuku Midoriya thinking. The whole stockpiling quirks thing. He looked back at Tashinori. Izuku Midoriya serious. If someone gives me their DNA willingly, I can add their quirk into one for all. Tashinori exhaled slowly. Tashinori Yagi low. That is unprecedented. Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya muttering. Yeah. Another small silence settled between them. Izuku kicked lightly at the sand with his foot. Izuku Midoriya quiet. It's amazing. He smiled a little, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. Izuku Midoriya honest. It really is. He looked down again, his expression shifting slightly. Izuku Midoriya soft, but Tashinori watched him carefully. Izuku Midoriya awkward. I feel kinda out of place now. He let out a small, almost embarrassed laugh. Izuku Midoriya sheepish. He rubbed the back of his head again. Izuku Midoriya quiet, like, I was already different before, but now. He gestured vaguely to himself. Izuku Midoriya uncertain. This feels like something else entirely. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at his shirt as he stood there. Izuku Midoriya thinking, I'm still me, I think. He looked at Tashinori again. Izuku Midoriya honest, but it's a lot. The waves rolled in again, steady and calm, like they didn't care about anything happening in the world beyond the shoreline. Tashinori watched Izuku for a moment longer, really taking in what he had just said. The boy in front of him looked stronger than ever, but there was still that same uncertainty underneath it all. Tashinori Yagi calm. Young Midoriya. Izuku looked up. Tashinori Yagi gentle. What you're feeling is natural. Slightly, his expression steady. Tashinori Yagi serious. You have inherited something that has grown far beyond what anyone expected. He paused briefly. Tashinori Yagi firm. Of course it feels overwhelming. Izuku listened quietly. Tashinori Yagi reassuring. But do not mistake that feeling for being out of place. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder again. Tashinori Yagi steady. You are not separate from this power. His voice softened slightly. Tashinori Yagi warm. You shaped it. Izuku blinked. Tashinori Yagi serious. You forced it to evolve. The words settled in. Tashinori Yagi calm. That means this version of one for all belongs to you. Izuku's eyes widened just a little. Tashinori Yagi encouraging. So embrace it. The wind picked up again, tugging at their clothes as the sunlight reflected off the water. Tashinori Yagi firm. Every part of it. Izuku looked down at his hand again, slowly clenching it. Izuku Midoriya quiet. Embrace it. Then he nodded slightly. Izuku Midoriya more certain. Yeah. Tashinori smiled faintly. Tashinori Yagi approving. Good. He stepped back slightly and looked toward the city. Tashinori Yagi businesslike. Now then. Izuku straightened instinctively. Tashinori Yagi serious. We do not have much time. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya confused. Time? Tashinori turned back to him. Tashinori Yagi calm. The UA Sports Festival. Izuku's eyes sharpened slightly. Tashinori Yagi focused. If what you've told me is true, your capabilities have changed significantly. He crossed his arms. Tashinori Yagi matter of fact. We cannot afford to guess where you stand now. Izuku nodded slowly. Izuku Midoriya thinking. So, training? Tashinori shook his head slightly. Tashinori Yagi calm. First evaluation. Izuku tilted his head. Izuku Midoriya curious. Evaluation? Tashinori nodded. Tashinori Yagi explaining. Principal Nizu has already requested it. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya surprised. Nizu? Tashinori gave a small smile. Tashinori Yagi dry. He is very interested in your current state. Izuku let out a small nervous laugh. Izuku Midoriya awkward. That's one way to put it. Tashinori turned fully toward the direction of UA. Tashinori Yagi serious. We will head to the school. He looked back at Izuku one more time. Tashinori Yagi firm. He wants to see exactly what you can do now. Izuku took a small breath. Then he nodded. Izuku Midoriya determined. All right. The uncertainty from earlier was still there, but now it felt a little more focused. Izuku Midoriya thinking. Guess we're starting now. Transition. Ground Omega stretched out like a massive artificial battlefield. Reinforced buildings and wide open zones designed to handle heavy impacts without collapsing. The morning air was still, the kind that made every sound carry a little farther. Izuku stood at the center, wearing a fitted black monitoring suit, thin lines of tech running along his body, while sensors tracked everything about him in real time. Behind him, on a raised platform, teachers and support staff watched closely with equipment lit up and recording. Nizu stood calmly at the front with his usual composed smile, while Aizawa, present Mike, and Tashinori observed more seriously. Nizu gave a small nod and spoke clearly, telling Izuku to begin with a simple test and strike the dummy with a reasonable amount of power. The large reinforced target stood several meters ahead, built to take hits from powerful quirks without instantly breaking. Izuku nodded and stepped forward, taking a slow breath as he focused. His body shifted subtly as he powered up, but this time there was no visible strain, no glowing veins, and no green electricity snapping around him like before. The change was quiet and controlled, almost unsettling in how natural it looked. He pulled his arm back and threw a single punch. The impact landed with a deep, heavy sound that echoed across the training ground, and the dummy didn't just shake, it tore free from its base and launched across the field. It smashed through a reinforced barrier and crashed hard into a distant wall, leaving cracks spreading through the structure. The ground beneath Izuku's feet fractured slightly from the force, dust lifting into the air as the shockwave spread outward. For a moment, nobody spoke. The platform behind him went completely still as the teachers processed what they had just seen. The monitors were lighting up rapidly, data spiking across the screens, but there was no sign of the unstable output they were used to seeing from him. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly, noticing the lack of backlash, while Nizu's expression sharpened with interest. Tashinori stepped forward a bit, his focus locked entirely on Izuku. Izuku lowered his arm slowly and looked at his hand, almost confused by how smooth that felt. There was no pain or recoil like before. Tashinori finally broke the silence, his voice steady but clearly serious as he asked how much of one for all Izuku had just used. Izuku paused, thinking about it for a moment as he glanced back at the damage across the field, then scratched his cheek slightly. I think that was around 20%. Transition. They didn't stop at one test. The next hour turned into a full evaluation as Ground Omega echoed with controlled impacts, movement drills, and repeated measurements. Izuku went through speed runs across the field, stopping on a mark with precision that cracked the ground but didn't destroy it. He lifted weighted structures meant to simulate collapsed buildings, holding them steady without shaking. He jumped, landed, redirected momentum, and struck multiple targets in sequence. Every time, the monitors tracked clean output with almost no instability, something none of the teachers were used to seeing from him. Each result made the platform quieter. The support staff kept glancing at each other while numbers updated rapidly across their screens. The data wasn't just high, it was consistent. No violent spikes, no dangerous feedback, no signs of his body tearing itself apart under the strain. Aizawa watched without speaking, his eyes following every movement closely. Present Mike had stopped talking entirely. Even Tashinori's expression had grown more serious with each test. Eventually, Nizu raised a paw slightly. Nizu pleasant. That will be enough. Izuku slowed to a stop in the middle of the field, breathing lightly but nowhere near exhausted. He walked back toward the platform while the staff continued reviewing the data. By the time he reached them, Nizu had already climbed up onto the console, looking over the final compiled results with a small, thoughtful smile. Nizu adjusted his posture. Nizu softly amused. Well now ho-ho. Everyone looked at him. Nizu tapped the screen lightly. Nizu calm. Based on these readings, we can form a preliminary conclusion. Izuku swallowed slightly. Tashinori stepped closer. Tashinori Yagi serious. What is it? Nizu turned to face them fully. Nizu matter of fact. Young Midoriya's current baseline output. He paused just long enough to let the weight of it settle. Nizu pleasant. Is approximately 4 times greater than All Might's present capabilities. Silence. Complete silence. Present Mic blinked. Present Mic quiet. 4 times? Aizawa didn't react outwardly, but his eyes sharpened slightly. Tashinori froze. For a moment, he didn't say anything at all. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya confused. Wait, what? Nizu nodded calmly. Nizu explaining. That is not to say you are 4 times more skilled, of course. His eyes gleamed slightly. Nizu clarifying. But in terms of raw power output, durability, and physical capability, your current state has surpassed your predecessor by a significant margin. Izuku slowly looked down at his hands again. Izuku Midoriya quiet. 4 times? Tashinori finally exhaled. Tashinori Yagi low. Incredible. Nizu smiled wider. Nizu calm. It would seem the evolution of One for All did not simply stabilize the quirk. He tapped the screen again. Nizu intrigued. It amplified it beyond expectations. The weight of that settled over the group. Izuku stood there, staring at his hands again, the realization slowly sinking in. The silence didn't last long. Nizu's smile slowly returned, and then grew wider, his eyes practically sparkling as he looked back at the data. The tension that had built up from the revelation began to ease, replaced by something else entirely. Excitement. Nizu cheerful. Oh my, how interesting. He hopped lightly onto the console, tail flicking behind him. Nizu amused. The potential here is extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Present Mic finally let out a breath. Present Mic half laughing. Yeah, extraordinary is one way to put it. Aizawa glanced at Izuku again, still calm, but clearly thinking ahead. Aizawa showed a flat. That kind of output isn't something we can just let loose in a school event. Nizu nodded immediately. Nizu agreeing, precisely. He turned toward Izuku again, hands behind his back. Nizu pleasant. Which brings us to the sports festival. Izuku straightened slightly. Izuku Midoriya focused. Yes, sir. Nizu tilted his head, smiling. Nizu lightly. You will still be participating, of course. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya relieved. Oh, okay. Nizu raised a small paw. Nizu calm. However, Izuku froze. Nizu's smile sharpened just a bit. Nizu matter of fact. You will be heavily restricted. Izuku's shoulders dropped slightly. Izuku Midoriya nervous. Restricted how? Nizu tapped the console again. Nizu explaining. Your output will be limited to approximately 3 to 5%. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya thinking. That low? Aizawa nodded. Aizawa showed a simple. Anything higher would be overkill. Nizu continued. Nizu cheerful. Additionally, you will be wearing specialized weighted gear. Izuku tilted his head. Izuku Midoriya curious. Weights? Nizu nodded happily. Nizu excited. Custom designed to suppress your physical output while maintaining mobility. Think of it as a handicap. Present Mic snorted. Present Mic grinning. Man's gotta nerf himself just to compete. Nizu clasped his paws together. Nizu playful. It shouldn't be too difficult for the savior of UA, correct? Izuku immediately looked flustered. Izuku Midoriya embarrassed. Please don't call me that. Nizu chuckled. Nizu amused. Hee. The mood had clearly shifted now. What had started as a heavy evaluation had turned into something almost lighthearted, at least on the surface. But Nizu wasn't done yet. He glanced back at the data again. Nizu casual. I'll be forwarding this information for further analysis, of course. Izuku nodded absent-mindedly and reached for a bottle of water nearby. Izuku Midoriya normal. That makes sense. Nizu continued. Nizu pleasant. To Nozomi Kagami. Izuku choked. Izuku Midoriya coughing. KGHK? Water went down the wrong pipe, and he bent forward slightly, coughing hard. Izuku Midoriya shocked. Wait, what? Everyone looked at him. Nizu tilted his head innocently. Nizu calm. Is something wrong? Izuku straightened up, still coughing a bit. Izuku Midoriya panicking. What do you know, Nozomi? Nizu's smile didn't change. Nizu pleasant. She is quite the talented designer. Aizawa glanced slightly to the side. Present Mike smirked. Present Mike teasing. Oh, so that's her. Izuku's face immediately turned red. Izuku Midoriya flustered. That's not I mean. Nizu chuckled softly. Nizu amused. Relax, young Midoriya. He tapped the console again. Nizu calm. Her work has already drawn attention in certain circles. Izuku blinked. Nizu's eyes gleamed slightly. Nizu lightly. And given that she is designing your new costume, he smiled wider. Nizu playful. It would be inefficient not to involve her. Izuku just stared at him, completely caught off guard. Izuku Midoriya muttering. Nizu is terrifying. City Hall felt way more serious than Izuku expected. The place was quiet, clean, and filled with that official kind of atmosphere that made everything feel important even if you were just standing in line. Izuku stood there holding Nozomi in his arms, mostly because walking long distances still wore her out, and she didn't seem to mind in the slightest. People glanced at them a few times as they waited, but he tried not to think about it too much. When they reached the front desk, things got awkward fast. The clerk looked at Nozomi, then back at Izuku, then back at Nozomi again. There was a long pause before the clerk slowly leaned forward. Clerk hesitant. Sir, how old is she? Izuku froze. Izuku Midoriya panicking. She's an adult. I swear. Nozomi didn't react at all. She simply reached into her bag and placed her ID on the counter without a word. The clerk picked it up, looked it over carefully, then blinked once before straightening immediately. Clerk clearing throat. Oh, my apologies. Nozomi Kagami flat. You're not the first. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly while the paperwork was processed. It didn't take too long after that. A few signatures, some stamps, and a couple of final checks later, the clerk slid the completed document across the counter. Clerk formal. Congratulations. You are now officially married. Izuku stared at the paper for a second, then looked at Nozomi. Izuku Midoriya quietly. We're married. Nozomi nodded, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Nozomi Kagami calm. Yes. Izuku let out a small breath and smiled. He leaned down slightly, careful with her, as she tilted her head up just enough. It wasn't dramatic or over the top. Just simple, real, a quiet moment between them. They sealed it with a kiss. After that, they left City Hall and headed into the city. Izuku carried her again halfway there after she started slowing down, which she didn't complain about at all. They ended up at a small sushi place tucked between a couple of shops. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and comfortable, and the smell alone made Izuku realize how hungry he actually was. They sat across from each other this time, food spread out between them. Izuku Midoriya relieved. This is way better than hospital food. Nozomi Kagami deadpan. Everything is better than hospital food. They ate for a bit in comfortable silence before Izuku leaned back slightly, thinking. Izuku Midoriya casual. So, 3 days. Nozomi didn't look up from her plate. Nozomi Kagami calm. Thursday. Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya thinking. Sports festival. He exhaled slowly. Izuku Midoriya half smiling. Feels like a lot happened before it even started. Nozomi picked up a piece of sushi and held it out toward him. Nozomi Kagami flat. You'll be fine. Izuku opened his mouth automatically. She shoved the sushi in. Izuku Midoriya muffled. Mem. Nozomi watched him chew. Nozomi Kagami matter of fact. Wish you luck. She paused, then added casually. Nozomi Kagami dry. Not that you'll need it. Izuku laughed a little once he swallowed. Izuku Midoriya smiling, wow. That confident, huh? Nozomi took another bite of her own food. Nozomi Kagami simple. I've seen the future. Izuku blinked, then smiled again, a bit more relaxed this time. Izuku Midoriya quiet. Guess I'll take that. Transition. The elevator ride was silent. Izuku stood with his arm around Nozomi, but he could feel the shift in the air the moment the doors opened into her penthouse. Before he could even think about carrying her, she pulled away from him. Nozomi walking toward the bedroom. Now. Izuku, slightly stunned, right? He followed her, watching as she moved with a purpose that was both intimidating and incredibly attractive. She stopped at the foot of the bed and turned to face him. Nozomi raising an eyebrow. What are you waiting for? Strip. He blinked, but his hands immediately went to his shirt. He fumbled with the buttons for a second before finally getting it off. By the time he was working on his jeans, she had already shed her own clothes, dropping them unceremoniously on the floor. She stood before him, completely unashamed, her small frame a stark contrast to the expansive room. Nozomi gesturing to the bed. Lie down. Izuku swallowing hard. Okay. He did as he was told, settling onto the dark gray linens. He watched as she climbed onto the bed, moving with a predatory grace. She straddled his hips, her knees pressing into the mattress on either side of him. Nozomi leaning down. You're gonna let me take the lead, hero? Izuku nodding. Whatever you want. Nozomi smirking. Good answer. She lowered her head, capturing his lips in a kiss that was all teeth and tongue. It was demanding, possessive, and he was more than happy to surrender to it. His hands came to rest on her hips, but she quickly pinned them above his head. Nozomi against his lips. No touching. Not yet. He groaned, his hips bucking up instinctively. She just laughed, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down his spine. She released his hands, but only to trail her own down his chest, her nails scraping lightly against his skin. She took her time, exploring every inch of him, her touch both teasing and deliberate. Izuku strained. Nozomi. Nozomi innocently. Yes? She shifted, positioning herself over his already hard length. She sank down onto him, taking him in one slow, fluid motion. The feeling of her, hot and tight around him, made his vision white out for a second. Izuku groaning. Oh no. Nozomi rolling her hips. That's the idea. She set a punishing pace, her movements sure and confident. She rode him with an intensity that left him breathless, her hands braced on his chest for leverage. He was completely at her mercy, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Izuku panting. God, you're incredible. Nozomi leaning down, I know. She kissed him again, a messy, desperate clash of lips and teeth. He could feel the tension coiling in his gut, a hot, tight knot of pleasure. He was close, so close, but he wanted to wait for her. Izuku against her lips. Nozomi, I'm gonna. Nozomi commanding. Hold it. He whimpered, his control fraying at the edges. She reached down, her thumb finding her spot and rubbing in tight, fast circles. Her movements became erratic, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Nozomi crying out, Zuka now. He let go, his peak crashing over him in a blinding wave of pleasure. He came with a hoarse shout, his body shuddering beneath her. She followed him over the edge a moment later, her inner walls clenching around him as she cried out his name. She collapsed against his chest, her body trembling. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they both came down from their high. Nozomi after a moment. Not bad for first try. Husband. Izuku laughing, yeah? Nozomi propping herself up. Don't let it go to your head. She leaned down and kissed him a soft, gentle thing this time. Nozomi quietly. You still owe me breakfast. Izuku smiling. Anything you want. Nozomi settling back against his chest. Good. Transition. Thursday arrived faster than expected. UA was louder than it had ever been, the distant roar of thousands of spectators echoing through the stadium and bleeding into the hallways. The energy in the air felt electric, like the entire place was vibrating with anticipation. From pro heroes watching in the stands to cameras broadcasting nationwide, Everything about the sports festival felt big. Inside the waiting room, Class 1A was gathered together. Some students were stretching, others were pacing, and a few were just sitting quietly trying to focus. The noise from outside only made the tension worse, but it also hyped them up at the same time. Everyone knew this was their chance to prove themselves. Kirishima cracked his knuckles. Kirishima grinning. Man, this is it. Kaminari bounced lightly on his feet. Kaminari Denki excited. Dude, you hear that crowd? Uraraka clasped her hands together nervously. Uraraka Achiko anxious. There's so many people. Bakugo stood off to the side, arms crossed, already looking irritated. Bakugo Katsuki smirking. Good. More people to watch me win. While everyone else was focused on the noise and excitement, Kirishima's attention shifted. He noticed Izuku standing near one of the benches, focused on something. Izuku was strapping something onto his wrists. Kirishima tilted his head. Kirishima curious. Yo, Midoriya, what's that? A few others looked over too. Izuku glanced up briefly while tightening the strap. Izuku Midoriya casual. Oh, these? He finished securing one and reached for the other. Izuku Midoriya explaining. They're weights. Kaminari blinked. Kaminari Denki confused. Weights? Izuku nodded and started fastening one around his ankle. Izuku Midoriya calm. Ultra compacted weights. He tapped one lightly. Izuku Midoriya explaining. They're designed to be dense enough to wear comfortably without getting in the way too much. Shiro leaned forward. Shiro Hana curious. Why are you wearing them though? Izuku scratched his cheek slightly. Izuku Midoriya honest. To handicap myself. The room paused. Kirishima blinked. Kirishima confused. What? Izuku kept working as he spoke. Izuku Midoriya matter of fact. Nizu's idea. He tightened another strap around his leg. Izuku Midoriya explaining. They reduce my speed and drain my stamina, so I don't overpower everything. Kaminari stared. Kaminari Denki shocked. You're nerfing yourself? Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya simple. Pretty much. He picked up the last weight and held it up briefly. Izuku Midoriya continuing. Each one adds about half of my body weight. The room went completely silent. Kirishima's eyes widened. Kirishima stunned. Half. Izuku nodded casually. Izuku Midoriya normal. Yeah. Then he activated them. The moment the weights engaged. His arm dropped. Izuku Midoriya surprised. Oh shoot. His shoulder dipped noticeably as the sudden increase in weight hit all at once. Izuku Midoriya laughing awkwardly. These are heavier than I thought. A few students just stared at him. Kaminari slowly leaned toward Kirishima. Kaminari Denki whispering. What kind of monster are we competing with? The room stayed quiet for a second after Izuku's arm dropped. Then a few of the students let out nervous laughs while others just stared at him like he was something completely different now. The weight alone would have made most people collapse. Yet Izuku just adjusted his stance and rolled his shoulder like he was getting used to it. The tension in the room shifted again when someone stepped forward, and without anyone saying it out loud, everyone could feel the change. Todoroki Shoto walked up to Izuku, his expression calm as always, his eyes locked directly onto him. Izuku looked up, curious but relaxed, while the rest of the class slowly quieted down to watch what was about to happen. Todoroki stopped a few steps in front of him, posture straight and unmoving, like he had already made up his mind about something important. Todoroki Shoto cold. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya curious. Todoroki? Todoroki Shoto serious. I've been thinking about the USJ incident. Bakugo Katsuki annoyed. TCH. Todoroki didn't even glance at him. His focus completely locked on Izuku as he spoke without hesitation. The room seemed to hold its breath while he continued, his voice steady and direct. Todoroki Shoto direct. You fought something designed to kill All Might. Todoroki Shoto calm. And you won. Izuku Midoriya awkward. Barely. Todoroki Shoto firm. You're the strongest one here. That single sentence hit the room like a shockwave. Several students stiffened, and Bakugo's head snapped toward them instantly, his expression twisting with anger. Bakugo Katsuki furious. What did you just say? Todoroki ignored him completely. As if Bakugo hadn't spoken at all, his attention still locked onto Izuku with that same unwavering calm. Todoroki Shoto focused. Some declaring war on you. Izuku Midoriya surprised. War? Todoroki Shoto calm. At the sports festival. Todoroki Shoto serious. I will defeat you. Todoroki Shoto cold. Using only my ice. Bakugo Katsuki exploding. You icy hot monster. Kirishima Ijiro panicking. Whoa, chill man. Bakugo Katsuki furious. I'm the one who's gonna win. Izuku looked at Todoroki for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't arrogant or dismissive, just calm and genuine, like he understood exactly what was being said and accepted it without hesitation. Izuku Midoriya calm. Alright. Izuku Midoriya steady. Challenge accepted. Todoroki nodded once, satisfied, and turned away without another word, the tension in the room still hanging heavy even after he left Izuku's space. It didn't last long, though, because the speakers suddenly crackled to life and Present Mic's voice blasted through the room and hallways, snapping everyone back to reality. Present Mic loud. All right, students, it's showtime. Present Mic excited. Class 1A, you're up next. The energy shifted instantly. Kirishima grinned wide. Uraraka took a deep breath to steady herself, and Ida straightened like he was preparing for a formal event. Bakugo cracked his knuckles with a sharp grin, still fired up and ready to explode at anyone in his way. Izuku adjusted the weight on his ankle one last time, feeling the heavy pull of it grounding him as the roar of the crowd outside grew louder and louder. Izuku Midoriya quietly. Here we go. The walk from the waiting room to the stadium entrance felt longer than it should have. The roar of the crowd grew louder with every step, shaking through the walls like thunder. Class 1 and moved together in a loose group, some of them looking fired up, some trying to stay calm, and some clearly realizing just how big this event really was. Izuku walked with the heavy weights locked around his wrists and ankles, each step carrying a dull pull that forced him to stay aware of his balance. Even with the extra weight, he kept his breathing steady, though he could already tell Nizu had made sure these things were not just for show. The moment Class 1A stepped into the stadium, the sound hit them all at once. Thousands of people were cheering, shouting, waving signs, and filling the stand from top to bottom. Pro heroes sat in special sections, watching closely, already judging every student who walked onto the field. Cameras hovered and moved across the arena, catching every reaction, every nervous face, and every confident grin. Izuku felt the pressure settle on his shoulders, but he kept walking forward with the others. Present Mic's voice blasted across the stadium, hyping up Class 1A as the class that had survived a real villain attack. That alone made the crowd roar even louder, and several students stiffened at the reminder. It was not something all of them wanted turned into a flashy introduction, but this was UA, and the sports festival did not slow down for anyone's trauma. Izuku glanced around at his classmates, noticing how some of them forced themselves to stand taller. They were scared, but they were here. Then came the student pledge. Bakugo Katsuki walked up to the podium with his usual sharp, arrogant stride. He looked completely unbothered by the crowd, the cameras, or the fact that every other class was standing behind him. The moment he reached the microphone, the stadium quieted down just enough for everyone to hear him clearly. Izuku already had a bad feeling before Bakugo even opened his mouth. Bakugo Katsuki smirking. I pledge. He leaned closer to the microphone. Bakugo Katsuki arrogant. That I'm going to be number one. The entire stadium went silent for half a second. Then the reaction exploded. Students from other classes immediately started shouting at him, some angry, some offended, and some just shocked by how casually he had painted a target on himself and the rest of Class 1A. Class 1B looked especially annoyed, with several of them glaring like they had just been personally insulted. Kaminari slowly covered his face with one hand. Kirishima gave an awkward laugh like he wanted to defend Bakugo, but couldn't find a way to do it. Kaminari danky muttering. He just made everyone hate us. Zero handed deadpan. Yeah, that's about right. MidoriIkaru nervous. Why would he say that? Ida Tinya stiff. That was extremely improper. Izuku sighed softly, already feeling the weight of everyone's stares shifting toward Class 1A. He looked over at Bakugo as he walked back like he had done nothing wrong. Bakugo didn't care at all. If anything, he looked satisfied. Izuku Midoriya, quietly. Kakin. Bakugo Katsuki snapping. What? Izuku Midoriya tired. Nothing. Bakugo clicked his tongue and looked away. A few moments later, Midnight stepped forward onto the main platform, her whip resting against her shoulder as she smiled toward the crowd. Her presence immediately pulled attention back to the event itself. The noise slowly settled as she raised one hand, clearly enjoying the energy in the stadium. The students stood in the center of the field, waiting for the first event to be announced. Midnight loud. Now then, everyone. The crowd cheered again. Midnight excited. It's time to announce the first event. A massive screen lit up behind her, cycling rapidly through possible challenges. The students stared at it, some tense, some excited, and some already trying to guess what kind of test UA would throw at them first. Izuku shifted slightly under the weight on his ankles, feeling the pull again. If this was a race, these weights were going to be a serious problem. The screen stopped. Obstacle course. Midnight grinned. Midnight announcing. The first event is an obstacle course. The crowd roared again as the screen changed to show a massive map of the course outside the stadium. It stretched far beyond the arena, wrapping around different zones filled with barriers, traps, and dangerous terrain. The students stared up at the display as the route highlighted itself in bright lines. It was not just a simple race. It was a full survival-style course built to test speed, judgment, core control, and raw guts. Midnight explaining. All students will start from the stadium gate and race through the course outside. She pointed toward the massive exit tunnel at the far end of the arena. Midnight clear. The goal is simple. Make it around the course and return to the stadium as fast as possible. A few students started muttering among themselves, already planning. Ida adjusted his glasses with a serious expression. Todoroki stared at the map quietly. Bakugo grinned like he had been waiting for something like this. Izuku looked at the route carefully, already analyzing turns, choke points, and places where too many students might get trapped together. Midnight continuing. You may use your quirks however you want, as long as you stay on the course, and don't intentionally try to kill anyone. She smiled like that was a perfectly normal rule to say out loud. Midnight playful. Try not to break each other too badly, okay? Some students looked deeply uncomfortable. Kirishima grinning. Man, this is going to be intense. MidoriIkaru nervous. That rule did not make me feel better. Mineta Minoru panicking. We're going to die. We're totally going to die. See you Azui calm. Probably not, Ribbit. Izuku flexed his fingers and looked down at the weights around his wrists. 3 to 5% only. Heavy gear active. No going overboard. He repeated the limits in his head like a checklist, forcing himself to treat this like training instead of a real emergency. He had to compete, but he also had to make sure he didn't accidentally blow past everyone so badly that the event became pointless. Todoroki glanced toward him from a few feet away. Todoroki Shoto calm. Don't fall behind. Izuku looked over and smiled slightly. Izuku Midoriya steady. I'll try not to. Bakugo heard that and immediately snapped his head toward them. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Don't act like this is between you two. Izuku blinked. Todoroki didn't respond. Bakugo Katsuki growling. I'm winning this. Midnight raised her arm high, cutting through the noise as the students were guided toward the starting gate. The massive tunnel ahead of them opened wide, revealing the first stretch of the course beyond the stadium. The crowd's cheering grew louder and louder, the sound pressing in from every side. Izuku lowered his stance slightly, feeling the weights drag at his limbs as he prepared to move. Midnight shouting, Now then, students? The lights above the gate began to flash. Midnight excited. Take your marks. The lights above the starting gate flashed faster and faster until the whole stadium seemed to hold its breath. Izuku lowered his stance, feeling the heavy pull of the weights around his wrists and ankles as he focused on the path ahead. He couldn't use too much power, not here, not with so many students packed together. He let one for all rise just enough through his body, keeping it at a controlled level, quiet and steady with no green sparks flying off him. It felt strange compared to before, almost too smooth, but he trusted it. Midnight shouting go. The gate opened and the students exploded forward. Izuku pushed off the ground and took off with the crowd, his weighted limbs dragging at him immediately. He wasn't moving at his real speed, not even close, but he was still fast enough to cut through the first rush of students before the path became too packed. His feet hit the ground hard with each step, the weights forcing him to work for every burst of movement. The pressure was annoying, but not impossible. Nizu had definitely designed them to make him sweat. A wave of ice suddenly shot across the ground ahead. Todoroki had made his move almost instantly, freezing the floor beneath the other students and spreading the ice wide to trap as many people as possible. Several students shouted as their feet locked in place or slipped hard against the sudden frozen path. The move was fast, clean, and sneaky, exactly the kind of thing Izuku expected from him. Todoroki didn't even look back as he kept moving forward. Izuku's eyes sharpened. Izuku Midoriya focused. There. He planted one foot right before the ice reached him and jumped, clearing the first spread before it could catch his shoes. The weights pulled at his legs midair, making the jump heavier than usual, but he twisted his body and landed on a narrow patch of unfrozen ground near the edge of the path. The moment his foot touched down, he pushed off again and used the sidewall for a quick rebound. His movement wasn't superhumanly fast like it could have been, but it was sharp, controlled, and just quick enough to avoid being trapped. Todoroki glanced back slightly. Todoroki showed calm. So you dodged it. Izuku landed ahead of a few frozen students and kept running. Izuku Midoriya calling back, barely. Bakugo blasted himself forward from behind, tearing past the ice with explosions from his palms. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Get out of my way. Kirishima, still partly stuck in the ice, shouted after them. Kirishima, Aijiro struggling. Man, they're already going crazy. The first stretch of the race narrowed into a long tunnel-like exit from the stadium, forcing everyone into a tight path. Izuku kept his arms close and moved through the crowd carefully, avoiding bumping into anyone too hard. Even with the weights slowing him down, one bad shove from him could send someone flying. That was the annoying part. He had to compete while constantly holding himself back. As he broke out of the tunnel, the first obstacle came into view. The path opened into a wide battlefield filled with towering metal robots. Massive zero-pointers stood across the course, the same kind of giant machines used in the entrance exam. Their heavy feet shook the ground as they moved, blocking the way forward with huge mechanical arms and glowing sensors. Smaller robots moved around their legs, creating a chaotic wall of metal that students would have to get through or around. The crowd's roar echoed from the distant stadium screens as the first obstacle fully activated. Present Mick's voice boomed over the speakers. Present Mike excited. First obstacle. The Robo Inferno. Izuku slowed for half a second, eyes scanning the field. Izuku Midoriya thinking. 0 pointers. One of the massive robots turned toward him, its sensor locking on as its arm lifted. The shadow of its fist fell over the ground. Izuku tightened his hand. Izuku Midoriya quiet. Okay, reasonable power. Izuku planted his foot hard into the ground and felt the weight around his ankle drag against him like an anchor. The closest giant robot was already swinging down, its metal arm cutting through the air toward the students below. A few people scattered, some diving out of the way while others froze for half a second too long. Izuku's eyes locked onto the machine's center mass, then shifted to the angle of its arm, the placement of its legs, and the space behind it. He couldn't just smash it apart carelessly. If he sent pieces flying everywhere, he would be the obstacle. Izuku Midoriya focused. Max limit. One for all surged through his body, still quiet and controlled, but stronger now. The weights pulled harder the moment his muscles tightened, almost like they were fighting him on purpose. He felt the strain in his arms and legs, but it wasn't pain. It was resistance. Nizu had made these things to force him to work for every inch, and right now, Izuku could feel exactly why. He bent his knees, and he launched upward. The ground cracked under his feet as he jumped, but not enough to break the whole road apart. The weights dragged his limbs down midair, making his rise slower than it should have been, but he still shot up toward the robot's chest with enough force to make the nearby students stare. The giant machine's glowing sensor shifted toward him too late. Izuku pulled his fist back, twisting his body to control the angle of the strike. Izuku Midoriya shouting, "Smash!" His fist slammed into the robot's chest. The impact sounded like a metal wall getting hit by a truck. The robot's torso caved inward around his fist, the force blasting through its frame and snapping internal supports apart. Its back split open with a loud metallic crack as pressure burst out the other side. The machine staggered backward, its huge feet scraping across the ground before it toppled onto its back with a heavy crash that shook the course. Izuku kicked off the collapsing robot and landed in front of it, sliding back several feet because of the weights. His shoes tore lines through the ground as he forced himself to stop. His arm felt fine. No break, no recoil, no bleeding. Just a dull ache from the weighted gear and the effort of holding himself back. Izuku Midoriya breathing out. Okay, that worked. For a second, the students around him just stared. Kirishima Ijiro from behind. Dude. Kaminari Denki shocked. He punched through it. Bakugo blasted past the falling machine, teeth grit in irritation. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Don't get cocky, Deku. Todoroki slid across the ground on his ice path, glancing at the destroyed robot for half a second before continuing forward. His expression barely changed, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Izuku saw it. Todoroki was measuring him again. Todoroki Shotokan. So that's your limit right now. Izuku pushed forward again, running after him. Izuku Midoriya calling. Not exactly. The speakers above the course exploded with present mixed voice as the crowd reacted to the hit. The stadium screens replayed the punch from multiple angles, showing Izuku launching upward, striking the robot, and landing cleanly without destroying the whole area. It wasn't the wild, body-breaking power from USJ. It was controlled, heavy, clean. Present mic hyped. Midoriya just dropped a giant robo with one clean hit. Aizawa showed a flat. He's still holding back. Present mic shocked. That was holding back. Aizawa showed a calm. Yes. That answer made the commentary booth go quiet for half a second. Izuku didn't hear most of it. He was already moving again, weaving between smaller robots while keeping his arms close so he didn't accidentally clip anyone. One robot swung low at him, and he ducked under it, grabbed its wrist, and used its own momentum to flip it sideways into another machine. Another tried to block his path, but he stepped in, struck its knee joint with a short punch, and sent it crashing down without scattering debris everywhere. He wasn't trying to win by destroying everything. He was trying to clear a safe path. That was the difference. A group of students behind him quickly realized what he was doing and started following the opening he made. Izuku noticed them from the corner of his eye and adjusted his movements, knocking down robots in ways that left enough space for others to pass through. The weights kept biting into his stamina, making his breathing heavier with each burst, but he kept moving. This was still a race, but if he could make the course safer without slowing down too much, he was going to do it. Uraraka Achiko calling from behind. Midoriya, thanks. Izuku glanced back for a split second. Izuku Midoriya smiling. Keep moving. Then the biggest robot in the first obstacle turned toward him. It was a zero-pointer, taller and heavier than the rest, its shadow stretching over the road like a moving wall. Its arm rose slowly, huge fingers curling into a fist. The machine locked onto Izuku, then stomped forward, shaking the ground with each step. Several students immediately scattered, not wanting to be anywhere near it. Izuku slowed just enough to look up at it. The weight on his wrists felt heavier now. His stamina was already starting to drain faster than expected. Izuku Midoriya thinking, okay, this one's different. The zero-pointer's fist came down like a falling building, its shadow swallowing the road in front of Izuku. Students scattered hard to both sides, some yelling as the ground shook beneath their feet. Izuku stayed where he was for half a second, eyes locked on the giant machine's arm as he judged the timing. The weights around his wrists and ankles pulled at him, his stamina already burning faster than normal, but he couldn't let that thing block the whole path. If it stayed standing, everyone behind him would lose too much time or get trapped. Izuku Midoriya focused. Max limit. One for all surged through his body as far as Nizu's restrictions allowed. It still didn't explode off him like before. No wild green lightning. No glowing lines, just a heavy pressure that settled into his muscles. Izuku bent his knees and pushed off the ground, launching straight toward the zero-pointer's falling fist. The weight bands dragged him down midair, but he forced his body forward anyway, twisting his shoulder and pulling his fist back. Izuku Midoriya shouting, smash. His fist slammed into the zero-pointer's knuckles. The impact cracked through the giant metal hand first, then ripped up the arm in a chain reaction of snapping joints and bursting panels. The machine's arm folded backward from the force, and the shock traveled straight into its shoulder. Izuku didn't stop there. He kicked off the broken arm, shot toward the robot's chest, and drove a second punch into its center frame. The zero-pointer's torso caved in with a horrible metallic crunch. Its glowing sensor flickered wildly before the entire machine tilted backward, its massive feet scraping across the ground as it lost balance. Izuku landed hard in front of it, sliding back from the force of his own movement while chunks of metal rained down behind him. The giant robot crashed onto its back with a ground-shaking boom, leaving a clear path through the first obstacle. For a moment, the students behind him just stared. Kaminari Denki shocked. He dropped the zero-pointer. Kirishima Ijiro pumped. That was so manly. Uraraka Achiko wide-eyed. He's wearing weights and still did that. Bakugo blasted past the fallen robot with an angry snarl, clearly more annoyed than impressed. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Don't think that means you're ahead of me, Deku. Todoroki was already moving ahead on a path of ice, but even he glanced back at the fallen zero-pointer for a second. His expression stayed calm, but his eyes narrowed. He had seen enough to know Izuku wasn't just strong. Even held back, he was still a serious problem. Izuku shook out his arm once, checking for pain. Nothing broken, just pressure in his muscles and the annoying drag of the weights biting into his stamina. That alone made him grin a little, because a few months ago, a hit like that would have destroyed his arm completely. Now he was still standing, still moving, and still in the race. Izuku Midoriya breathing hard. Okay, keep going. He pushed forward, sprinting through the opening he had made. The weights made every step heavier, but he forced his rhythm back into place and started making up for lost ground. Todoroki had gained distance with his ice path, and Bakugo was cutting through the air ahead with explosions, but Izuku wasn't too far behind. He leaned forward and drove his legs harder, each footstep cracking lightly against the road as he picked up speed. Present Mick's voice boomed over the course as the crowd roared from the stadium screens. Present Mike hyped. Midoriya just turned a zero-pointer into scrap metal, and he's still moving. Aizawa showed a flat. His control is better than expected. Present Mike excited. Better than expected? Eraser. That was insane. Aizawa showed a calm. For him, that was controlled. Izuku passed the last few smaller robots and broke out of the Robo-Inferno zone. The path ahead widened for a moment before curving toward the next part of the course. He could already see the terrain changing in the distance. The ground dropped away into a wide gap filled with tall metal pillars, hanging ropes, and unstable platforms stretching across the open space. The second obstacle was coming up fast. Izuku narrowed his eyes as he ran toward it, already studying the layout. The weights would make jumping harder, and the platforms looked like they were built to shake under pressure. If he landed too hard, he could break them. If he moved too slow, Todoroki and Bakugo would pull too far ahead. The second obstacle opened up in front of the students like a giant trap. The solid road ended suddenly, dropping into several deep pits that stretched across the course. Thin metal wires ran from one side to the other, barely wide enough for a student to balance on. Below them, the pits were deep enough to make anyone hesitate, even if the landing area was probably padded somewhere far below. It was clearly built to slow everyone down, forcing them to cross carefully or risk falling and losing precious time. Bakugo didn't care about the wires at all. He blasted forward with both hands, explosions cracking behind him as he flew over the gap with a wild grin. Todoroki slid across on a smooth bridge of ice, keeping his balance perfectly as frost spread under his feet. Ida came right after him, engines roaring in his legs as he used the wires like a narrow track, moving with sharp control. The three of them were already pulling ahead again. Izuku reached the edge and slowed for half a second. The weights around his ankles made balancing on those wires a bad idea. One wrong step, and his own weight could bend the wire too much or throw off his movement. He could try to cross carefully, but that would waste time. He looked at the gap, then at Bakugo, and Todoroki ahead, then down at his hands. Izuku, Midoriya thinking, I can't run across that safely. He took a few steps back. A few students behind him noticed. Kirishima, Ijiro confused. Midoriya? Izuku didn't answer right away. He lowered his stance, letting one for all settle through his legs at the highest output Nizu allowed. The weights pulled hard, making his muscles work harder just to stay ready. His eyes focused on the far side of the gap, measuring the distance, the angle, and the amount of force he could use without blasting the whole area apart. Izuku, Midoriya quiet. Okay. Then he sprinted. His feet slammed against the ground in heavy, controlled steps, each one cracking the surface just a little as he built momentum. The edge came fast. The pit opened beneath him. Right before he reached it, Izuku pushed off with both legs and launched himself into the air. For a second, he was just flying forward. Then the weights started dragging him down. Izuku twisted midair, pulled one arm back, and aimed behind himself. Izuku, Midoriya shouting, New Hampshire. He punched the air behind him with all the limited power he was allowed to use. Boom! The air exploded from the force of the punch, launching him forward like a human cannonball. The shock wave blasted backward across the edge of the pit, kicking up dust and making several students throw their arms up to shield their faces. Izuku shot across the gap, his body angled forward as the sudden burst of air carried him over the wires completely. Present Mic's voice immediately lost it over the speakers. Present Mic hyped. Midoriya just used air pressure to launch himself over the pit. Aizawa showed a flat. He copied All Might's New Hampshire smash. Present Mic shouting, with weights on. Aizawa showed a calm, yes. Izuku flew over the last stretch of the gap and spotted the landing zone rushing toward him. He twisted again, bringing his legs forward while bracing his arms. The weights made the landing rough, dragging him down faster than he wanted. He hit the ground on the far side with a heavy skid, boots scraping across the surface as cracks spread under his feet. Izuku, Midoriya grunting, GH. He slid several meters before catching himself with one hand against the ground. Dust rolled past him as he stopped, breathing a little harder now. His arms still felt fine, but his stamina was definitely taking a hit. The weights were doing their job way too well. Bakugo glanced back from ahead, teeth bared. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Stop copying All Might, nerd. Izuku stood up and shook dust off his sleeve. Izuku, Midoriya calling. It worked, didn't it? Todoroki looked back too, calm but clearly paying attention. He didn't say anything, but the way his eyes narrowed said enough. Izuku had crossed the obstacle without using the wires, without breaking the course, and without going past his limit. That mattered. Ida adjusted his glasses while running ahead. Ida, Tenya's serious. That was reckless, but highly effective. Izuku took another breath, then started running again. The second obstacle was behind him now, but the course wasn't over. Ahead, the path curved toward the final section, where the ground changed again. Signs, barriers, and warning markers covered the area in the distance. Izuku could already see small round shapes scattered across the ground. His eyes narrowed. Izuku, Midoriya thinking minds. The final section of the course spread out ahead like a warning sign. The ground was covered in small, buried mines, most of them hidden just under the surface with only faint bumps and markers giving them away. They weren't meant to seriously injure anyone, but they were strong enough to blast students off balance, throw them backward, and ruin their timing. For anyone trying to move carefully, this part would be a nightmare. For Izuku, it looked like a chance. He slowed for half a second, eyes scanning the field. Todoroki and Bakugo were still ahead, both choosing their paths carefully in their own way. Todoroki was using ice to slide across sections without putting too much pressure on the ground. Bakugo was blasting above the mines when he could, but even he had to adjust his angle to avoid getting caught by the explosions. Ida was behind them, trying to move fast while avoiding direct contact. Izuku looked at the mines again. Izuku, Midoriya thinking, if I set them off first. His eyes shifted toward the students behind him. Izuku, Midoriya thinking, then everyone else gets a cleaner path. It was risky, but not impossible. The mines had a short delay between pressure and full detonation. If he moved fast enough, they would explode behind him instead of under him. The weights would make that harder, but he had enough power left for one final push. He lowered his stance, letting one for all rise through his legs to the max limit Nizu allowed. Izuku, Midoriya quiet. Okay, go. He took off. His first step hit the minefield hard. Boom! The mine exploded behind his foot a split second after he was already gone, kicking up dirt and smoke. Izuku didn't stop. He drove forward faster, each step landing with just enough force to trigger another mine before he passed over it. Explosions chased him across the field in a rapid chain, blasting upward behind him like a trail of fire and smoke. Bakugo glanced back and snarled. Bakugo Katsuki furious. What the hell is he doing? Todoroki looked over his shoulder, eyes widening slightly as Izuku came tearing through the minefield. Todoroki Shoto low. He's setting them off. Ida's eyes widened behind his glasses. Ida Tenya shocked. He's clearing the route for the others while advancing. Izuku's legs burned from the weight and the constant acceleration. Every explosion pushed hot air against his back, but he stayed just ahead of the blasts. The mines went off one after another, loud enough to shake the course and send smoke rolling across the ground. The crowd inside the stadium could see everything on the screens, and the roar grew louder with every step he took. Present Mike screaming. Midoriya is running straight through the minefield. Aizawa showed a flat. He's timing the detonations. Present Mike shocked. He's using himself as the trigger. Aizawa showed a calm, and making the path safer behind him. The explosions didn't slow him down. If anything, the pressure behind him helped push him forward, giving him just enough extra momentum to close the gap. Bakugo blasted forward harder, refusing to let Izuku pass him. Todoroki slid faster on his ice path, jaw tightening as he realized Izuku was gaining. The finish line was coming into view now, the stadium entrance waiting at the end of the course. Izuku's breathing grew heavier. The weights were dragging hard now. His stamina was draining fast. Izuku, Midoriya thinking. Almost there, a mine exploded behind him, and the blast shoved him forward harder than expected. He stumbled for half a step, nearly losing balance, but caught himself and turned the stumble into another push. His shoes tore through the dirt as he leaned forward, forcing his body to keep moving. The finish line was right there. Bakugo shot forward with a final explosion. Todoroki's ice surged beneath him. Izuku clenched his teeth and pushed one last time. Izuku, Midoriya shouting, "Come on!" He crossed the finish line first. For a second, everything seemed to freeze. Then the stadium exploded. The crowd roared so loudly that the sound hit like a wave. The screen showed Izuku sliding past the finish line, smoke rolling behind him from the minefield he had cleared. Bakugo landed a second later, furious, while Todoroki slid in just behind him, his expression calm but visibly annoyed. Izuku stumbled forward a few steps, then caught himself with his hands on his knees, breathing hard. Present mic yelling. First place in the obstacle course, Izuku Midoriya. The crowd got even louder. Izuku slowly looked back at the course, seeing the cleared path behind him and the students starting to make it through more easily. A tired smile crossed his face. Izuku Midoriya breathing hard. Good, that worked. The first event ended with the stadium still buzzing. Students were brought back into the waiting area for a 30-minute rest break, and for once, most of them actually used it. Some collapsed onto benches, some grabbed water, and others just sat quietly while trying to process what had happened. Izuku sat near the wall with his weights still on, breathing slowly as he let his body cool down. The weights had done exactly what they were supposed to do, but his legs felt heavy now, and his arms had that tired burn from constantly fighting against the added pressure. Kirishima dropped down beside him with a grin, still looking fired up despite the exhaustion. Kirishima excited. Dude, you won the whole thing while wearing those weights. Izuku gave a small, tired laugh. Izuku Midoriya humble, barely. Kaminari leaned over from the other side, pointing at him. Kaminari Denki deadpan. Barely? You ran through a minefield like it was a morning jog. Izuku scratched his cheek awkwardly. Izuku Midoriya nervous. Wasn't that easy. Zero shook his head. Zero Hana flat. That makes it worse. Across the room, Bakugo sat with his arms crossed, glaring at the floor like it had personally insulted him. Todoroki stood quietly near the wall, eyes closed, clearly saving energy for whatever came next. Ito was reviewing the event in his head, probably judging everyone's decisions, including his own. Urarika drank water slowly, still trying to calm her nerves after the minefield. After 30 minutes, the students were called back into the stadium. The crowd was still loud when they stepped out again. The screen showed the current rankings from the obstacle course, with Izuku's name sitting at the top. You try not to stare at it too long, but it was hard not to feel the pressure of everyone looking at him. The sports festival wasn't just about winning anymore. Every event was turning into a test of how much attention he could survive. Midnight stepped forward again, smiling brightly as the students gathered in the center of the field. Midnight excited. All right, everyone. Great work surviving the first event. Mineta Minoru muttering. Surviving is the right word. Midnight lifted her whip and pointed toward the massive screen behind her. Midnight announcing. Now it's time for the second event. The screen began spinning through different options again, flashing words too quickly for anyone to read clearly. Several students tensed, expecting something like cavalry battle, capture the flag, or another brutal physical challenge. Izuku shifted slightly under the weight gear, preparing himself for anything. Then the screen stopped. Hero fashion show. The entire stadium went quiet for a second. Then confused noise spread everywhere. Kaminari Denki blank. What? Kirishima confused. Hero? Fashion show? Bakugo Katsuki furious. What kind of event is that? Todoroki Shoto calm. Unexpected. Izuku blinked at the screen. Izuku Midoriya confused. That's new. Midnight looked extremely pleased with the reaction. Midnight cheerful. That's right. This year, Yue is trying something different. The crowd started cheering again, clearly interested now. Midnight explaining. Hero work isn't just about power, speed, or fighting ability. Presentation matters too. She walked across the platform with confidence, speaking clearly to the whole stadium. Midnight continuing. A hero's costume tells civilians who they are, what they represent, and how they operate. The screen changed, showing examples of famous hero costumes from different agencies. Midnight clear. So for this event, all 42 remaining students will present their hero costume designs. Several students looked at each other in surprise. Midnight announcing. Viewers, observers, and registered pro heroes will vote based on design, function, theme, practicality, and overall hero appeal. Izuku's eyes widened slightly. Izuku Midoriya thinking. Nozomi. Midnight raised one finger. Midnight's serious. The top 16 students will move on to the final event. The students reacted immediately. Urarika Achiko nervous. Only 16. Ida Tenya stiff. That means over half of us will be eliminated. Shiro Hana worried. And it's based on votes? Kaminari Denki panicking. I'm cooked. Bakugo clenched his fists, explosions popping in his palms. Bakugo Katsuki angry. I don't need some fashion contest. Midnight smiled wider. Midnight playful. Then you'd better hope your costume speaks louder than your attitude. Some of the crowd laughed. Bakugo's eye twitched. Izuku stood quietly, still processing the rules. His old costume had been destroyed at USJ, and Nozomi had insisted on designing his new one herself. She hadn't told him much about it. Not the full look, not the details, not even the exact colors beyond a few vague comments. Now, suddenly, that surprise was about to be shown in front of the entire country. Kirishima noticed his face. Kirishima, Ijiro curious. Midoriya, you good? Izuku swallowed slightly. Izuku, Midoriya nervous. My wife designed mine. Kaminari's head snapped toward him. Kaminari Denki shocked. You're what? The moment the students were sent to the changing rooms, Izuku knew he was in trouble. Not from villains, not from robots, not from mines, but from his own classmates. The second the boys' changing room door closed behind them, Kaminari and Shiro grabbed him by both arms and dragged him toward the benches like they were hauling in a criminal for questioning. Kirishima followed close behind with wide eyes, while Ida looked deeply conflicted between respecting Izuku's privacy and needing an explanation for what he had just heard. Izuku Midoriya panicking. Wait guys, hold on. Kaminari Denki shocked. Nope. Sit down. Shiro Hanta pointing. You don't get to casually say my wife and then walk away. Kirishima, Ijiro stunned. Bro, you married? Izuku was forced down onto one of the benches, still holding part of his folded costume bag in his hands. He looked between them with a nervous smile, realizing way too late that he had said that out loud in front of everyone. Bakugo was changing nearby, pretending not to care, but the fact that he hadn't yelled yet meant he was absolutely listening. Todoroki stood by his locker with the same blank expression as always, though even he had paused with one hand on his costume case. Ida Tenya's serious. Midoriya, I do not wish to intrude on personal matters, but marriage is a major life event. It is highly unusual for a student our age to already be married. Kaminari leaned closer, eyes narrowed like a detective. Kaminari Denki suspicious. And you said it like it was normal. Shiro Hanta deadpan. Like, oh yeah, my wife designed my costume. Dude, Kirishima Ijiro excited. That's crazy manly, but also what? Izuku's face went red as he rubbed the back of his neck. He didn't know where to start, because explaining Nozomi was never simple. Childhood friend, fashion designer, psychic visions, fragile health, gothic personality, adult who looked much younger than she was, and now wife. Saying all of that in a locker room before a nationally televised hero fashion show felt like a lot. Izuku Midoriya awkward. It's kind of a long story. Kaminari immediately pointed at the bench. Kaminari Denki firm. We have time. Shiro Hana nodding. Enough time. Ida Tenya adjusting glasses. At minimum, we require basic clarification. Izuku sighed softly, then lifted his left hand without thinking. The movement caught the light, and everyone's eyes locked onto the small ring on his finger. It was simple, clean, and not flashy at all, but it was definitely a wedding ring. The room went silent for half a second. Kaminari Denki whispering, he has a ring. Kirishima Ijiro wide-eyed. He really has a ring. Shiro Hanta staring. That's not a joke ring either. Todoroki Shoto calm. So it's legal. Izuku looked over at him, startled. Izuku Midoriya flustered. Yes, it's legal. Bakugo finally snapped his head toward them. Bakugo Katsuki furious. Why the hell are you married, Deku? Izuku flinched hard. Izuku Midoriya defensive. Because we wanted to be. Kaminari made a strangled noise. Kaminari Denki overwhelmed. That answers nothing. Izuku took a breath, trying to calm himself down before this got even more chaotic. He looked down at the ring for a second, and despite the embarrassment, his expression softened. The room noticed. Even Bakugo, though he looked annoyed by it. Izuku Midoriya quieter. Her name is Nozomi Kagami. We've known each other since we were kids. Kirishima's expression shifted from shock to interest. MidoriIkaru curious. Childhood friend? Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya soft. Yeah. She was the only person who really believed I could be a hero back then. That made the room quiet down a little. Izuku Midoriya honest. When everyone else thought I was being stupid for wanting to be a hero without a quirk, she didn't. She just told me if I was going to do it, I should stop whining and get better. Zero blinked. Zero Hannah slowly. That sounds supportive and terrifying. Izuku smiled slightly. Izuku Midoriya fond. That's Nozomi. Kaminari leaned back, still processing. Kaminari Denki curious. So, she designed your costume? Izuku nodded and looked down at the costume bag in his hands. Izuku Midoriya nervous. Yeah. My old one got destroyed during USJ, so she made this one herself. Ida's expression grew more respectful. Ida Tenya serious. Then this costume may have significant personal meaning. Izuku nodded again. Izuku Midoriya quiet. It does. Bakugo scoffed and turned back toward his locker, but his shoulders were tense. Bakugo Katsuki grumbling. TCH, married nerd. Kaminari suddenly leaned in again. Kaminari Denki squinting. Wait. You said wife. How old is she? Izuku immediately stiffened. Izuku Midoriya fast. 19. Zero raised an eyebrow. Zero Hanta confused. Why did you answer that so fast? Izuku's face went redder. Izuku Midoriya awkward, because people ask a lot. Todoroki tilted his head slightly. Todoroki Shoto calm. Does she look younger? Izuku stared at him. Izuku Midoriya weak. Very. Kaminari slowly nodded. Kaminari Denki processing. Okay, that explains the panic. Kirishima slapped Izuku on the shoulder, careful not to hit too hard. Ijiro grinning. Still, that's awesome, man. Weird timing, but awesome. Izuku gave a small laugh, finally relaxing a little. Izuku Midoriya awkward but happy. Thanks. Then the speakers crackled overhead, and Midnight's voice echoed through the changing rooms, telling the first group of students to prepare for costume presentation. The boys immediately started moving again, rushing to get changed before they were called. Izuku looked down at the bag in his hands and slowly unzipped it, his nerves coming back all at once. For the first time, he was about to see what Nozomi had made for him. Transition. The hero fashion show started with way more energy than anyone expected. At first, a lot of the students looked awkward about it because fighting robots and running through minefields felt more normal than walking out in front of thousands of people just to show off their costumes. Midnight stood at the center platform with a bright smile, clearly enjoying how nervous everyone looked, while the huge screen behind her displayed the voting rules again. Viewers at home, pro heroes in the stands, and official observers all had access to the voting system, and every student would be judged on function, theme, safety, and how well their costume matched their hero identity. It wasn't just about looking cool, even though Kaminari immediately whispered that looking cool was absolutely part of it. Midnight announcing, "Welcome to the second event of the UA Sports Festival, the Hero Fashion Show." The crowd cheered, some confused but most clearly into it now. Aizawa and Present Mike were moved into a commentary booth where they could discuss each student as they came out. Aizawa looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, while Present Mike looked like he had been born for this exact moment. The first few students came out one by one, wearing their hero costumes and walking across the main stage while the cameras circled them. Some were confident, some were stiff, and some looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Present Mike excited. First up, we've got Tenya Ida from Class 1A. Engine legs, clean armor, sharp lines, and that whole serious hero vibe. Aizawa showed a flat. His costume is practical. Good protection, good movement support, and it fits his quirk. Present Mike grinning. Fun fact. He comes from the famous Ida hero family, so this design has legacy written all over it. Ida walked with perfect posture, arms stiff at his sides, try to treat the whole thing like a formal inspection. The crowd liked him, especially the pro heroes who appreciated how much his suit focused on function. After him came MidoriIkaru, whose round helmet and padded suit got a warm reaction because it clearly matched her zero-gravity fighting style. Then came Kirishima, who walked out with a grin and flexed just enough to make the crowd cheer. His rough, open design got a lot of votes from people who like straightforward brawler heroes. Present Mike loud. Kirishima, Ijiro. Hardening quirk. Look at that rugged style. Aizawa showed a calm. Minimal armor because his body is the armor. Risky, but it fits him. Present Mike laughing. Fun fact. He calls everything manly, including probably this stage. Kirishima, Ijiro grinning. That's because it is. The crowd laughed, and Kirishima walked off looking proud of himself. Kaminari came next and tried to pose like a model, only to trip slightly near the end and recover by pretending it was part of the walk. Zero's tape base gear got praise for being simple and clean, while Jiro's sound-based support items got attention from the tech-minded heroes in the stands. Momo's costume caused some mixed reactions, with Aizawa bluntly explaining that her quirk required exposed skin for material creation, which made some of the crowd calm down and actually think about the function behind it. Then Todoroki walked out. The crowd got louder right away. His costume was simple, split between his fire and ice sides, though he still leaned heavily into his ice-based look. He walked like he didn't care about the votes at all, which somehow made people pay more attention. Present Mike hyped up his clean design and famous family background, while Aizawa focused on how the costume allowed free movement and didn't interfere with temperature control. Todoroki barely reacted to any of it, but his votes shot up quickly on the screen. Present Mike excited. Shoto, Todoroki, son of Endeavor. Half cold, half hot, but today he's bringing that cool side hard. Aizawa showed a flat. Strong quirk compatibility. Simple design. No wasted parts. Present Mike teasing. And no smile either. Todoroki Shoto calm. Was I supposed to? Present Mike laughing. A little wouldn't hurt. Bakugo came after him, stomping onto the stage like he was there to fight the entire voting system personally. His grenade gauntlets, heavy boots, and combat-heavy design got a huge reaction from the crowd. Aizawa admitted the costume was aggressive but very effective for his quirk, while Present Mike called it loud, dangerous, and very Bakugo. Bakugo didn't pose. He just glared at the cameras like they owed him money. Bakugo Katsuki snapping. Vote or don't vote. I'm still winning. Present Mike hyped. That's Bakugo Katsuki, everybody. Somehow making threats during a fashion event. Aizawa showed tired. At least his costume works. Bakugo's votes were high, mostly because people could tell his costume was built for actual combat and not just style. He walked off still irritated, especially after seeing Todoroki's name close to his on the ranking board. More students followed after him, each one getting their moment, until finally Midnight looked down at her card and smiled in a way that made Izuku's stomach twist. He was next, Midnight announcing. And now, first place winner of the obstacle course, Class 1A's own Izuku Midoriya. The stadium erupted before he even stepped out. Izuku walked onto the stage with a grin that he couldn't fully hide. It wasn't his nervous smile or his awkward classroom smile. It was the kind of grin a kid had when they got to wear the hero costume they had dreamed about for years. He looked genuinely happy, almost schoolboy excited, and that alone made the crowd soften toward him before they even looked at the costume properly. Then the cameras zoomed in, and the full design appeared on the giant screen. He wore a dark green high-collar bodysuit with black accents, fitted close to his frame, but not so tight that it looked uncomfortable. A red belt with a black square buckle sat at his waist, matching the red knee-high boots with iron soles that gave the outfit a grounded, classic hero look. His arms were protected by braces and tight wrist straps, with bold blue stripes wrapped around his biceps. His white gloves had blue palms, and each knuckle had yellow sights built into them, while dual, layered wristbands with blue seams and small yellow bolts added a practical support tech feel. A long white cape attached cleanly at his shoulders, falling behind him in a wide, heroic shape, and his usually messy hair was slicked back except for one stubborn strand that refused to stay down. The crowd loved it. Present Mike shouting, "There he is, Izuku Midoriya. And look at that cape." Aizawa showed a calm. The design is simple, but it's practical. Reinforced bodysuit, protected joints, stable boots, and visible silhouette. Present Mike excited. Translation. It looks cool, and it actually works. Izuku laughed a little under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck as the cameras caught his face. He could feel himself getting embarrassed, but he couldn't stop smiling. This was Nozomi's work. Every piece of it felt like she had thought about how he moved, how he fought, how he saved people, and how he wanted civilians to see him. It wasn't flashy in the usual way. It was strong, clear, friendly, and easy to recognize. Izuku, Midoriya, quietly. She really made it. Aizawa glanced at the notes in front of him, then looked slightly more awake than usual. Aizawa showed her reading. Designer listed as Nozomi Kagami Midoriya. The boys from Class 1 immediately reacted from the waiting area. Kaminari Denki shouting, "That's the wife." Shirohanda laughing. "The wife made the cape." Kirishima Aijiro pumped. "That's so manly." Izuku's face went bright red on the big screen. Izuku Midoriya flustered. "Guys." Present Mike immediately leaned into the microphone like he had found gold. Present Mike grinning. Hold up. Did we just hear wife?" "Midoriya, you got something to tell the viewers?" Izuku stiffened. Izuku Midoriya panicking. No comment. The crowd exploded with laughter and cheers, and Izuku looked like he wanted to hide behind his own cape. Aizawa, to his credit, did not save him at all. He just kept reading the costume notes like this was completely normal. The voting numbers on the screen started climbing fast, and not just because of the marriage comment. The costume had a clean, heroic image that people could understand immediately. Aizawa showed a calm. The cape is likely for visibility. Civilians can spot him from a distance during disasters. It also gives him a stronger public silhouette. Present Mike curious. Interesting choice, though. Everybody knows some designers hate capes. Izuku glanced back at the cape over his shoulder, still smiling despite himself. Izuku Midoriya soft. "Yeah, I was surprised too." He knew exactly why it surprised him. Nozomi was the granddaughter of Edna Mode, one of the most famous costume designers in the world, and Edna's hatred of capes was basically legendary. Nozomi had heard no capes so many times growing up that Izuku honestly expected her to ban them from his costume completely. Instead, she gave him one of the most noticeable capes in the whole event. That meant she had a reason, and knowing Nozomi, it was probably a very blunt one. Izuku could almost hear her voice in his head. Nozomi Kagami imagined, dry. "You're not stealthy, Izuku. You're a walking rescue siren with legs. People should see you coming." That made him smile even more. Present Mike hyped. "And look at those votes climb. People are loving the classic hero feel." Aizawa showed a flat. "It fits him." Present Mike teasing. "That almost sounded like praise." Aizawa showed a tired, "Don't ruin it." Izuku reached the end of the stage and turned back toward the crowd. He gave a small wave, then bowed politely, which somehow made the cheering louder. It wasn't a huge dramatic pose. It was just him being himself, grateful and a little overwhelmed. The cape shifted behind him as he straightened, and the cameras caught the full image perfectly. Green suit, white cape, red boots, bright eyes, and that awkward but honest smile. The final student finished their walk, and the stadium lights shifted back toward midnight at the center platform. The huge screen behind her stopped showing costume close-ups and switched to the live voting board. Names moved up and down quickly as the last votes came in from viewers, pro-heroes, and official observers. Some students watched with nervous faces, some tried to act like they didn't care, and Bakugo looked like he wanted to blow up the screen itself. Izuku stood with the rest of Class 1A, still wearing his new costume, his white cape resting behind him while he quietly hoped Nozomi was watching somewhere. Midnight announcing, "All right, everyone, the votes are in." The crowd got louder, and the screen flashed bright as the final ranking locked into place. Izuku looked up and saw his name near the top, but not at the very top. First place went to Shoto Todoroki. Second place went to Izuku Midoriya. Third went to Katsuki Bakugo, and the rest of the top 16 followed underneath them. For a second, Izuku blinked, then smiled like he had just been told good news instead of losing first place. Midnight excited. First place in the hero fashion show goes to Shoto Todoroki. The crowd cheered hard as Todoroki stood there with his usual calm expression. He didn't look smug or excited, just slightly surprised that his costume had one. His design was simple, clean, and easy to understand, with a strong split theme that matched his quirk perfectly. Pro heroes clearly liked how direct and functional it was, and the public liked how cool he looked without even trying. Todoroki glanced at the screen, then looked away like the whole thing was only mildly interesting. Present Mike hyped. Todoroki takes first place. Clean design, strong theme, famous bloodline, and that icy cool presence. Aizawa showed a flat. His costume is efficient. It doesn't fight against his quirk. Present Mike grinning. And second place goes to Midoriya. The white cape almost took it. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, smiling sheepishly as some of his classmates turned toward him. He wasn't upset at all. If anything, he looked relieved. Second place was still more than enough to move on, and Nozomi's design had been seen by the entire country. That mattered more to him than beating Todoroki in a costume vote. Kirishima, Ijiro grinning. Second place is still awesome, man. Uraraka Achiko smiling. Your costume looked really good, Deku. Kaminari Denki teasing. The wife did not miss. Izuku Midoriya flustered. Please stop saying it like that. Shirohana laughing. Nope. That's your lore now. Izuku looked back at the screen, still smiling softly. He imagined Nozomi watching the results with that calm, unreadable face of hers, probably while secretly judging every stitch on every costume. She would probably tell him second place was acceptable, then immediately complain that the camera angles didn't show the cape properly. The thought made him laugh under his breath. Izuku Midoriya quietly. She's going to say the lighting was bad. Todoroki walked over after the announcement, his eyes shifting from Izuku's cape to his face. He didn't seem proud of winning, but he did seem like he had something to say. The crowd noise continued around them, but the two stood close enough to hear each other clearly. Todoroki Shoto calm. You're not upset? Izuku Midoriya confused about what? Todoroki Shoto straightforward. Losing. Izuku blinked, then smiled. Izuku Midoriya honest. No. You won fair. Todoroki stared at him for a second like that answer was too simple. Izuku Midoriya warm. Besides, second place still gets me to the final event. That's what matters. Todoroki's expression barely changed, but his shoulders seemed to relax a little. Todoroki Shoto quiet. You're strange. Izuku Midoriya laughing softly. I get that a lot. Bakugo stomped over immediately, glaring at both of them with his hands sparking at his sides. His name being third had clearly done more damage to his pride than any villain ever could. He looked at Todoroki, then at Izuku, then back at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. Bakugo Katsuki furious. This voting was rigged. Kaminari Denki deadpan. You threatened the audience during your walk. Shirohana nodding. That probably cost you points. Bakugo Katsuki snapping. Shut up. Izuku tried not to laugh, but failed a little. Bakugo heard it immediately and whipped around on him. Izuku raised both hands in surrender, still grinning despite himself. Bakugo Katsuki growling. You laughing, Deku? Izuku Midoriya quickly. Nope. Bakugo Katsuki angry. You are? Izuku Midoriya trying not to laugh. A little. Bakugo's palms popped with small explosions, but before he could say anything else, Midnight cracked her whip against the stage. The sound cut through the noise and pulled everyone's attention back to her. The top 16 names remained on the screen, glowing bright for the entire stadium to see. Midnight announcing, "Congratulations to our top 16 students." The crowd cheered again as the screen zoomed in on the final bracket slots. Izuku's smile faded into focus as he realized what came next. The fun part was over. The fashion show had been strange, funny, and honestly kind of nice, but now the sports festival was moving into the final event. That meant one-on-one battles. Midnight excited. These 16 will move on to the final tournament. The stadium exploded with noise. Izuku looked at the bracket as the names began shuffling into place. His cape shifted behind him as he stood a little straighter. He was happy about second place. He was proud of Nozomi's work. But now, with the final event coming, he knew he had to lock back in. The next fight would not be about costumes. The arena was loud again after the 1-hour break. Students were back in their gym uniforms, the crowd was back in their seats, and the giant stadium screen showed the next match bracket. The sports festival had already been intense, but now it felt different because the one-on-one fights were starting. There was no team to hide behind, no obstacle course to blame, and no extra rules to soften things. It was just two students standing across from each other in the middle of the ring while everyone watched. Midnight stood near the edge of the arena with her microphone in hand, smiling like she was enjoying every second of the tension. The sunlight hit the stadium floor, and the concrete ring looked almost too clean compared to how chaotic the earlier events had been. The crowd was already buzzing, waiting to see who would be called first. Some people were talking about Bakugo, some were talking about Todoroki, but a lot of eyes were already looking for Izuku Midoriya. Midnight raising her microphone. All right, everyone. The first match of the tournament round is about to begin. The crowd cheered loudly. Midnight smiling. Our first two contestants are Izuku Midoriya from the hero course. The crowd got louder almost instantly. Midnight continuing, and Hitoshi Shinso from general studies. The second name got a smaller reaction, but it still spread through the stadium. Some people looked confused because they didn't know much about Shinso. Others leaned forward, curious about how someone from general studies had made it this far. Up in the student stands, several members of Class 1A watched closely. MidoriIkaru leaning forward. Midoriya's first match is already starting. Ida adjusting his glasses. He must remain cautious. Tournament matches are not always decided by raw strength alone. Kirishima grinning. Still, it's Midoriya. I mean, the guy's crazy strong. Bakugo didn't say anything at first. He just stared down at the arena with narrowed eyes. Bakugo muttering, "Don't screw this up, Deku." Down in the arena tunnel, Izuku stepped into the light with a focused but excited look on his face. He wasn't smiling like he thought he had already won. It was more like he was genuinely happy to face someone new. He rolled his shoulders, stretched his arms, and bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. His gym uniform shifted with each small jump, and his green hair bounced messily with him. Izuku Midoriya quietly to himself. Okay, first match. New opponent. General Studies, Hitoshi Shinso. I don't know his quirk yet, so I need to be careful. He kept jumping in place, not because he was trying to show off, but because he had too much nervous energy sitting in his body. Izuku always got like this before something important. His mind was already running through every possible situation, every small detail, every movement Shinso might make. To anyone who knew him, it was obvious he was excited and nervous at the same time. But Hitoshi Shinso didn't know him. Shinso walked out from the opposite tunnel with his hands in his pockets and a tired look on his face. His messy, purple hair, heavy eyes, and flat expression made him look like he hadn't slept properly in days. A few students in the stands immediately noticed that he looked weirdly similar to Aizawa, almost like he could have been his secret son or younger brother. Shinso ignored the crowd completely and kept his eyes on Izuku. Shinso thinking, so that's Midoriya? Izuku was still bouncing lightly in place. Shinso's eyes narrowed. Shinso thinking, seriously? He's that excited? From Shinso's point of view, it looked annoying. Here he was, a general studies student who had fought his way into the tournament with almost nobody expecting anything from him, and his first opponent was the famous hero course kid everyone kept talking about. Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless kid who somehow got into UA. The one who had already become one of the biggest names in the first-year class. The one people kept whispering about like he was something special. And now he was jumping in place like this was going to be fun. Shinso flatly, you look pretty excited. Izuku stopped bouncing and looked at him. Izuku Midoriya blinking. Huh? Shinso tilted his head slightly. Shinso annoyed. What? You happy you got someone from general studies first? Izuku's eyes widened a little. Izuku Midoriya quickly. No, that's not what I meant at all. Shinso stared at him without changing his expression. Shinso dry, sure. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, already realizing how bad it must have looked from the outside. Izuku Midoriya awkward. I'm just excited because I don't know much about your fighting style. That means I have to figure it out during the match, and that's kind of... He paused. Izuku Midoriya sheepish. Interesting? Shinso's expression didn't soften. If anything, he looked more annoyed. Shinso thinking. So he really does think this is some kind of game. The crowd noise kept rolling around them while Midnight stepped between the two contestants. She looked from Izuku to Shinso, then lifted her microphone again. Her smile was playful, but her eyes were sharp. She knew this match could end fast depending on how both students handled it. Midnight cheerful. Both contestants, take your positions. Izuku nodded and stepped back to his side of the ring. He lowered his stance slightly, keeping his hands loose instead of clenched. He didn't know what Shinso could do, and that bothered him. No obvious mutation, no visible weapon, no clear physical signs of a quirk. That meant it could be mental, vocal, sensory, or something conditional. Izuku Midoriya thinking. He got through the cavalry battle somehow. He wasn't physically overpowering people, so his quirk probably has a trick. I need to avoid giving him an easy opening. Across from him, Shinso stood casually with his hands still in his pockets. He didn't take a fighting stance. He didn't stretch. He didn't even look worried. That made Izuku even more cautious. Shinso calling out, "You hero course people really do get everything handed to you, huh?" Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya confused. What? Shinso's mouth twitched slightly, like he had been waiting for that. But Izuku didn't step forward yet. He caught himself. Izuku Midoriya thinking, wait. Shinso watched him carefully. The stadium felt loud and quiet at the same time. The crowd was cheering, Present Mike was hyping everyone up in the announcer booth, and Midnight was about to start the match. But inside the ring, Izuku's focus narrowed to Shinso's face, his voice, and the way he seemed to be waiting for a response. Present Mike from the booth. Here we go, listeners. Hero Course versus General Studies. Power versus Mystery. This first match is already looking spicy. Aizawa sat beside him in the commentator area, wrapped in bandages from earlier events, but still watching carefully. His tired eyes were fixed on Shinso. He knew exactly how dangerous this match could become if Midoriya didn't figure things out fast. Present Mike grinning. Eraser, you got any thoughts? Aizawa flatly. Midoriya needs to stop talking. Present Mike blinked. Present Mike confused. That's it? Aizawa watching closely. That's it. Back in the ring, Midnight raised her arm. Midnight shouting, first match. Izuku lowered his body slightly, ready to move. Shinso stared at him with that same tired, annoyed look. Midnight bringing her arm down. Begin. Shinso immediately opened his mouth. Shinso sharp. So what's wrong, Midoriya? Too scared to answer me now? Izuku's first instinct was to move. He still didn't know Shinso's quirk, and that was exactly what made him curious. Shinso wasn't standing like a fighter. He wasn't guarding his face, wasn't shifting his feet, and wasn't even trying to close the distance. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching Izuku like he was waiting for something. That alone told Izuku there had to be a catch. Izuku Midoriya thinking. He wants me to answer him. That has to be it. Izuku lowered his stance a little more. The safest move was simple. Rush and fast. Don't talk. Don't let Shinso set the pace. If Shinso's quirk needed a response, then Izuku just had to avoid responding. It sounded easy enough, but Izuku knew better than to relax. A quirk that got someone from General Studies this far had to be dangerous. Shinso's eyes narrowed when Izuku didn't answer. Shinso dry, wow. So you really are scared to talk now? Izuku didn't respond. He took one step forward. The crowd started getting louder, sensing that the match was finally about to start for real. Up in the stands, MidoriIkaru leaned forward with both hands gripping the railing. Ito watched with a serious look, already noticing that Izuku was avoiding conversation on purpose. Bakugo, however, clicked his tongue like he had already figured out the trick. Bakugo muttering, "Don't answer him, idiot." Shinso noticed Izuku's silence and gave a small, annoyed huff. Shinso thinking, so he figured out that much already. Izuku pushed off the ground. He moved fast, not at full power, but fast enough that most students would have panicked. His shoes scraped against the arena floor as he rushed forward, closing the distance between them in a quick burst. Shinso's expression barely changed, but his jaw tightened. He had one chance to force a reaction before Izuku got close enough to end the match. So Shinso said the one thing he knew would hit. Shinso cold. So, Midoriya, is it true what people say about your wife? Izuku's foot hit the ground hard. He stopped. The sudden stop made dust kick up around his shoes. Shinso kept his eyes locked on him. Shinso, pushing harder. No Zomi Kagami, right? The one who looks like a little girl? The stadium noise dipped for a second, like several people had heard just enough to go quiet. Izuku's face changed immediately. His calm focus cracked. Shinso saw it, and he kept going. Shinso low. So what does that make you? Izuku's fist clenched so hard his knuckles popped. Shinso tilted his head. Shinso sharp. A pedo? That did it. Izuku's eyes snapped wide with anger. Izuku, Midoriya furious. Don't you dare talk about her like that. The second the words left his mouth, everything wrong. Izuku's body froze. His pupils dulled slightly, and the anger on his face went blank like someone had suddenly cut the strings inside him. His fists slowly unclenched. His shoulders relaxed. The whole arena seemed to tilt in his mind, but his body kept standing there, perfectly still. Shinso exhaled through his nose. Shinso quiet. Got you. Up in the stands, Uraraka's eyes widened. Uraraka, alarmed. Midoriya? Ida stood up fast. Ida shouting, Midoriya, can you hear us? Bakugo slammed his hands against the railing. Bakugo angry. Deku, you idiot. In the commentator booth, Present Mike leaned toward the glass with wide eyes. Present Mike shocked. Whoa. Midoriya just stopped moving. What happened? Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Aizawa serious. Brainwashing. Present Mike turned toward him. Present Mike surprised. Brainwashing? Aizawa didn't look away from the arena. Aizawa flat. If Midoriya answered him, Shinso can control him. Down in the ring, Shinso kept his voice calm and steady. Shinso commanding, walk out of bounds. Izuku's body moved. One step, then another. The crowd started shouting all at once. Some people didn't understand what was happening, while others realized the match was about to end without a single punch being thrown. Izuku walked forward with empty eyes, heading straight toward the white boundary line at the edge of the ring. His movements were stiff and slow, like his body was following orders without him inside it. Midnight watched carefully, her expression more serious now. Midnight raising her hand slightly. If Midoriya steps out of bounds, the match is over. Shinso didn't smile, but his eyes sharpened. Shinso thinking, that's it, just a few more steps. Izuku's foot lifted. The line was right there. One more step and he would lose. Inside Izuku's mind, everything felt distant and muffled. The stadium, the crowd, Shinso's voice, even his own body felt like it was on the other side of thick glass. He could hear himself screaming somewhere deep inside, but he couldn't move. His anger had been real, and Shinso had used it perfectly. Izuku Midoriya inside his mind, move. Come on, move. His foot started to lower toward the line. Then it stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The entire stadium froze with it. Izuku's shoe hovered just above the boundary line, close enough that everyone could see how near he had been to losing. His body trembled once, like two different forces were fighting over the same muscles. Shinso's eyes widened slightly for the first time. Shinso confused. What? Izuku's head slowly lowered. His breathing changed. The blank look on his face shifted, but it didn't return to his normal expression. His posture straightened in a way that felt different. His shoulders relaxed, his chin lifted, and his hands settled at his sides with a strange kind of grace. It wasn't Izuku's usual nervous energy. It was calmer, older, and sharper. Up in the stands, Todoroki leaned forward. Todoroki quiet. Something changed. Uraraka swallowed. Uraraka worried. Midoriya? Izuku slowly turned his head toward Shinso. His green eyes were still glowing faintly, but the look behind them wasn't fully his anymore. There was a softness in the face, but also a confidence that felt almost maternal. His stance had changed too, lighter on the feet, one hand resting near his hip while the other hung loose. It was almost feminine but not weak. If anything, it made him look more dangerous because every movement was too calm. Shinso took a small step back. Shinso uneasy. I told you to walk out. Izuku's mouth curved into a small, knowing smile. But the voice that came out was still Izuku's voice, just carried differently. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura calm. That was a nasty thing to say to a boy who loves his wife. The arena went quiet. Aizawa's eyes widened just a little. Aizawa, under his breath. No way. Present Mike looked between him and the arena. Present Mike confused. What? What is it? Aizawa didn't answer right away. Down below, Shinso stared at Izuku like he was looking at a completely different person. Shinso tense. Who are you? Izuku tilted his head slightly. The smile stayed. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura softly. Someone who doesn't like bullies. Izuku's body moved before Shinso could say another word. 1 second he was standing near the boundary line with his foot barely inside the ring, and the next second the concrete cracked under him. He pushed off the ground so hard that a sharp boom snapped through the arena. Dust burst outward from where he had been standing, and the white boundary line shook from the force. The crowd barely had time to react before Izuku was already gone from that spot. Shinso's eyes widened. Shinso shocked. What the? Izuku appeared in front of him almost instantly. No, not Izuku. Not exactly. His body was still Izuku's, but the way he moved was completely different. His stance was lighter, smoother, and way more relaxed than usual. His shoulders weren't tense, his eyes weren't wide with panic, and his mouth held a small smirk that looked nothing like the nervous boy everyone knew. It was the look of someone who had been in plenty of fights before and already knew how this one was going to end. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura smirking. Lesson 1. Shinso barely raised his arms in time. Nana threw a punch. It wasn't a full-powered smash. If it had been, Shinso would have been sent through the stadium wall and probably into the parking lot. Instead, Nana controlled the force perfectly, landing the punch right into Shinso's guard with enough strength to knock the air out of him and send him skidding backward across the arena floor. His shoes scraped hard against the concrete, and his arms shook from the impact. Shinso stumbled, but stayed inside the ring. Shinso coughing, gah. The crowd exploded. People stood up from their seats, shouting in confusion and excitement. Some thought Izuku had broken out of the brainwashing somehow. Others had no idea what they had just seen. To most of them, it looked like Midoriya had gone from completely controlled to suddenly moving like a totally different person. Uraraka gripped the railing with both hands. Uraraka worried. That's Midoriya, right? Ida's glasses flashed as he leaned forward. Ida confused. His movement pattern has changed completely. Kirishima blinked hard. Kirishima stunned. Okay, that was cool, but also kind of scary. Bakugo stared down at the arena with his teeth clenched. Bakugo low. That ain't Deku. Todoroki looked at him. Todoroki quiet. What do you mean? Bakugo didn't look away. Bakugo tense. He doesn't move like that. Down in the ring, Shinso forced himself to straighten up. His arms still hurt from blocking that punch, and his face twisted with frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. Once someone answered him, the match should have been over. They should have walked out of bounds without fighting back. That was how his quirk worked. But Midoriya had stopped, and now he was looking at him like he was the one being tested. Shinso angry. How are you moving? Nana rolled Izuku's shoulder like she was getting used to his body. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura casual. Good body. A little tense, though. Shinso stared at him. Shinso confused. What? Nana lifted one hand and pointed at him. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura firm. You got a strong quirk, kid. No doubt about that. Her smirk faded a little. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura sharper. But using someone's wife as bait? That was low. Shinso's jaw tightened. Shinso defensive. It's a fight. Nana stepped forward slowly. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura calm. It's a school match. Shinso backed up half a step without meaning to. Nana noticed. Her smirk came back. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura lightly. Don't worry. I'm not going to break you. She lowered her stance slightly. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura smirking. I'm just going to teach you some manners. Shinso clenched his fists. Shinso snapping. Who the hell are you? Nana didn't answer right away. Instead, she took one smooth step forward, then vanished again with a burst of speed. Shinso tried to follow her movement, but his eyes couldn't keep up. She appeared at his side, not behind him, not directly in front, but just off his blind spot. It was the kind of positioning that made it clear she wasn't relying on raw power. She knew exactly where to stand to make him uncomfortable. Shinso twisted toward her. Too late. Nana flicked 2 fingers against his forehead. It wasn't even a punch this time, but the force was enough to snap his head back and make him stumble. Shinso pained, ow. Nana folded Izuku's arms. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura dry. Lesson 2. Don't run your mouth if you can't protect your face. The crowd got even louder. Present Mike practically slammed both hands onto the announcer desk. Present Mike shouting, "What is happening down there?" Midoriya was brainwashed. Then he stopped, and now he's moving like he's been possessed by a retired pro hero. Aizawa didn't laugh. His eyes were locked on Izuku's body. Aizawa low. That's not Midoriya controlling himself. Present Mike turned toward him. Present Mike confused. You're serious? Aizawa's face stayed flat, but his eyes narrowed. Aizawa's serious. His posture changed. His center of gravity changed. His reaction timing changed. Even his facial expressions are different. Behind them, Toshinori Yagi stood quietly near the back of the booth. He had been watching the match with a worried look ever since Shinso insulted Nozomi. At first, he thought Izuku had simply snapped out of the brainwashing through sheer willpower. But the longer he watched, the colder his chest felt. The smirk, the way Izuku held his shoulders, the relaxed footwork, the controlled power behind every movement. He knew that style. Toshinori Yagi, quietly. Nana? Aizawa turned his head slightly. Aizawa sharp. You know what this is? Toshinori didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on Izuku. In the arena, Nana moved again. Shinso tried to speak. Shinso desperate. Answer me. Who are? Nana appeared in front of him and tapped his chin upward with one knuckle, cutting him off before he could finish. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura warning. Nope. Shinso froze. Nana leaned in slightly, still wearing that small smirk. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura calm. I know how your trick works now. You need a response, right? Shinso's eyes widened. Nana straightened up. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura matter of fact. Good quirk. Bad attitude. Shinso grit his teeth and swung at her. It was a rough punch, more frustration than technique. Nana slipped under it easily. She didn't even look rushed. She stepped inside his guard, caught his wrist, turned her hip, and gently flipped him over her shoulder. Shinso hit the ground on his back with a loud thud, hard enough to make him cough, but not enough to seriously hurt him. The arena went wild. Midnight stared with her microphone lowered slightly. Midnight under her breath. Well, that's new. Shinso groaned and tried to sit up. Nana stood over him with one hand on Izuku's hip. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura smiling. Lesson 3. Shinso glared up at her. Izuku Midoriya / Nana Shimura soft but firm. If you want people to respect your quirk, stop acting like the kind of person they're scared you'll become. That hit harder than the punch. Shinso's expression shifted for half a second. Just half a second. But Nana saw it. In the booth, Toshinori's hand tightened into a fist at his side. Toshinori Yagi quiet. It's her. Present Mike looked at him. Present Mike stunned. Her who? Toshinori swallowed. His voice came out softer than usual. Toshinori Yagi low. My master. Shinso stayed on the ground for a second, breathing hard and staring up at Midoriya like he still didn't understand what he was looking at. His back hurt from the throw, his arms stung from blocking that first punch, and his forehead still throbbed from that stupid little finger flick. None of it was serious enough to end the match by injury, but it was enough to make one thing clear. Whoever was moving Midoriya's body right now knew exactly how much force to use. Nana stood over him with Izuku's hands resting loosely at his sides. She didn't look angry anymore, but she also didn't look like she was playing around. The smirk on her face was still there, small and sharp, like she had already decided how this was going to end. Shinso pushed himself up on one elbow trying to get his feet under him before she moved again. Shinso breathing hard. I'm not done yet. Nana tilted Izuku's head slightly. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura calm. Good. Shinso blinked. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura smirking. Then get up properly. For a moment, Shinso just stared at her. That wasn't what he expected. Most people either got scared of his quirk or angry at him for using it. Midoriya had gotten angry, sure, but this was different. This person, whoever she was, wasn't looking at him like he was a monster. She looked annoyed with him, yes, but not disgusted. That somehow made it worse. Shinso forced himself to stand. His legs were shaky, but he got up anyway. Shinso Lo, you talk like you know everything. Nana gave him a small shrug. Izuku, Midoriya/Nana Shimura casual. Not everything. She stepped forward. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura firm. Just enough. Shinso clenched his fists and tried to back away, but Nana moved first. She didn't use a huge burst of power this time. She simply stepped in fast, slipped around his guard, and caught the front of his gym shirt with one hand. Shinso tried to grab her wrist, but she twisted her arm, turned her shoulder, and pulled him off balance before he could plant his feet. Shinso startled. Wait. Nana swept one foot behind his ankle. His balance disappeared. Before he could hit the ground, she shifted her grip and redirected him sideways instead. Shinso stumbled hard toward the edge of the arena, arms flailing as he tried to stop himself. His shoes scraped across the concrete, but he couldn't slow down fast enough. The white boundary line rushed under his feet. Shinso stepped out. Midnight's eyes widened. Then she lifted her microphone. Midnight shouting, Hitoshi Shinso is out of bounds. The crowd roared. Midnight pointed toward Izuku. Midnight announcing, winner. Izuku Midoriya advances to the next round. The stadium exploded with noise. Some people cheered because they loved seeing Midoriya win. Others were still confused because they had no idea what had just happened. From the outside, it looked like Midoriya had been brainwashed, stopped himself, changed personalities, and then calmly beat Shinso without even using a real smash. It was impressive, but it was also strange enough that the whole arena was buzzing with questions. Shinso stood just outside the ring, staring down at the line under his shoes. For a second, he didn't move. Then his hands slowly clenched. Shinso quiet. F it. Nana turned toward him. The smirk faded a little. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura softly. You've got talent, kid. Shinso looked up at her, still frustrated. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura honest. A lot of it. Shinso didn't answer. Nana's expression sharpened again, but not in a cruel way. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura firm. But don't let bitterness do all your talking. It makes you sloppy. Shinso's jaw tightened. Shinso bitter. Easy for you to say. Nana gave him a look that made him pause. Izuku Midoriya/Nana Shimura quiet. No, it isn't. For some reason, that shut him up. Nana turned away from him and started walking toward the exit tunnel. The way she walked still didn't look like Izuku. It was too relaxed, too confident, and too smooth. Izuku usually walked with a little nervous energy, like his thoughts were moving faster than his body. This was different. This was someone who had already been a hero, already made mistakes, and already learned how to carry herself in front of a crowd. Up in the commentator booth, Present Mike was still trying to process it. Present Mike staring. Okay, I'm going to say it. That was not normal. Aizawa's eyes followed Izuku's body carefully. Aizawa flat, obviously. Present Mike turned to him. Present Mike half shouting. That's all you've got? Aizawa didn't blink. Aizawa dry. I'm still deciding how much paperwork this is going to create. Tashinori stood behind them, silent. His face was pale. His eyes were fixed on Izuku. He knew that walk. He knew that posture. He knew the way she had held back while still making every move count. But more than anything, he knew that smirk. That same sneaky, playful confidence had been burned into his memory since he was young. Then Nana stopped near the arena tunnel. She turned her head slightly, looking up toward the commentator booth. For 1 second, her eyes met Tashinori's. The crowd was still roaring, but to Tashinori, everything else went quiet. Nana smiled. Then she gave him a quick, sneaky wink. Tashinori's breath caught in his throat. Tashinori Yagi barely whispering, "Master." Aizawa noticed the look on his face. Aizawa lo Yagi. Tashinori didn't answer. Nana turned away again, still wearing that little smirk, and walked into the tunnel with Izuku's body like she owned the whole stadium. The second she disappeared from view, the crowd noise rushed back and around them. The hallway under the stadium was much quieter than the arena. The crowd could still be heard through the walls, but it was muffled now, more like distant thunder than thousands of people shouting at once. The lights above buzzed softly, and the floor had that clean, polished look all UA buildings seem to have. Izuku's body kept walking for a few more steps after leaving the tunnel, still moving with Nana's relaxed confidence instead of his usual nervous energy. Then he stopped. His shoulders twitched once. His fingers flexed. The green glow in his eyes faded slightly, and his posture shifted all at once. The smooth, almost lazy confidence disappeared, replaced by Izuku's normal stiff awkwardness. His shoulders rose a little, his hands pulled closer to his chest, and his face turned bright red the second he fully realized what had just happened. Izuku Midoriya blinking fast. Oh my gosh. Inside the Vestige Realm, Nana Shimura's laugh echoed warmly through his mind. Nana Shimura amused. That was fun. Izuku froze in the hallway. Izuku Midoriya embarrassed. Fun? Nana's presence felt lighter now, no longer controlling his body, but still close enough for him to hear her clearly. Izuku could almost picture her standing there with her hands on her hips and that same smug smile on her face. She sounded way too pleased with herself. Nana Shimura cheerful. I haven't been able to move around like that in years. Do you know how nice it is to throw a proper punch again? Izuku covered his face with both hands. Izuku Midoriya muffled. You took over my body during a nationally televised school match. Nana Shimura casual. You were about to lose. Izuku lowered his hand slightly. Izuku Midoriya weakly. I know, but still. Nana's voice softened a little, though the humor was still there. Nana Shimura gentle. Kid, he had you. Your anger made you answer him, and his quirk grabbed you right away. I stepped in because I could. That's all. Izuku let out a long breath and leaned back against the hallway wall. His face was still warm from embarrassment, but he couldn't really argue with her. Shinso had baited him perfectly. The second Nozomi was mentioned like that, Izuku had lost control of his mouth before his brain could stop him. Izuku Midoriya quiet. I shouldn't have answered. Nana Shimura matter of fact. No, you shouldn't have. Izuku winced. Nana Shimura softer, but I get why you did. Izuku looked down at his hands. His fingers curled slightly. Izuku Midoriya low. He talked about Nozomi like. She was something wrong. Nana was quiet for a second. When she spoke again, her voice had less teasing in it. Nana Shimura firm. Then next time, protect her by staying smart, not by giving the enemy exactly what he wants. Izuku nodded slowly. Izuku Midoriya is serious, right? A door opened farther down the hall. Izuku looked up. Tashinori Yagi stepped into the corridor, still in his thin form, wearing a loose shirt and slacks instead of his hero costume. He looked calm at first, but Izuku knew him well enough to see the concern in his face. His eyes were sharp, his mouth was tight, and he was walking faster than usual. Tashinori Yagi calling out, Young Midoriya. Izuku straightened immediately. Izuku Midoriya nervous. All Might. Tashinori stopped a few feet away from him. For a second, he didn't say anything. He just looked at Izuku's face, then his posture, then his eyes, like he was checking whether the person in front of him was really back in control. Izuku stood there awkwardly, hands at his sides, trying not to look like someone who had just been possessed by his mentor's dead teacher in front of an entire stadium. Tashinori Yagi carefully. Are you yourself right now? Izuku nodded quickly. Izuku Midoriya fast. Yes. Yes, sir. Ami now. Tashinori stared at him. Izuku swallowed. Izuku Midoriya smaller. Mostly. Tashinori's eyebrow twitched. Tashinori Yagi concerned. Mostly? Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. Izuku Midoriya awkward. Nana-san is still here. I mean, she's always here, technically, but she's not controlling anything anymore. Inside his mind, Nana hummed proudly. Nana Shimura, please, tell him I said hi. Izuku's face tightened. Izuku Midoriya embarrassed. She says hi. Tashinori froze. His eyes widened just a little. For a moment, the hallway felt very still. Tashinori Yagi quiet. She said hi. Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya softly. Yes. Tashinori looked away for half a second, like he needed time to keep his expression under control. When he looked back, there was still concern there, but also something warmer. Something sadder. Something that made Izuku realize this wasn't just weird for him. It was personal for Tashinori too. Tashinori Yagi low. That wink. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya confused. The wink? Tashinori gave a weak, almost helpless smile. Tashinori Yagi quiet. That was her. Nana laughed in Izuku's head. Nana Shimura smug. He remembered. Izuku's face went red again. Izuku Midoriya muttering. She says you remembered. Tashinori's smile shook a little. He looked like he wanted to laugh and cry at the same time, but he held himself together. Tashinori Yagi soft. Of course I remembered. Then his expression became serious again. Tashinori Yagi focused. Young Midoriya, I need to ask you something. Has this ever happened before? Izuku shook his head quickly. Izuku Midoriya honest. Not like that. I've talked to the vestiges before, and sometimes I can feel them when I'm using one for all, but Nana-san has never taken control of my body before. Tashinori crossed his arms loosely. Tashinori Yagi thinking. And you allowed it? Izuku hesitated. Izuku Midoriya uncertain. I don't think I did. I was brainwashed, and I couldn't move. I was trying to stop myself from stepping out, but I couldn't reach my body. Then Nana-san just grabbed the wheel. Nana made a please sound in his head. Nana Shimura casual. Good way to put it. Izuku sighed. Izuku Midoriya tired. She says that's a good way to put it. Tashinori rubbed his forehead. Tashinori Yagi mildly overwhelmed. I see. He didn't sound angry. That helped. But he definitely looked like he had about 20 questions and no idea which one to ask first. Tashinori Yagi carefully. Do you feel hurt? Dizzy? Disconnected from your body? Izuku shook his head. Izuku Midoriya checking himself. No. I feel normal. A little embarrassed, but normal. Tashinori nodded slowly. Tashinori Yagi relieved. Good. Then his mouth twitched. Tashinori Yagi dry. Though I must admit your control was excellent. Izuku blinked. Izuku Midoriya surprised. My control? Tashinori looked toward the arena entrance. Tashinori Yagi honest. Her control, technically, but it was your body and your power. She used just enough force to win without hurting Shinso badly. That is not easy with one for all. Izuku looked down at his hands again. Izuku Midoriya quiet. She made it look easy. Nana's voice softened. Nana Shimura warm. That's what experience does. Tashinori studied Izuku's face. Tashinori Yagi serious. Young Midoriya, this may be useful, but it is also dangerous. If the vestiges can take control under certain conditions, we need to understand why. We need to know if it only happened because of Shinso's brainwashing or if it can happen again. Izuku nodded. Izuku Midoriya focused. I understand. Nana went quiet for a moment. Then her voice came through, calmer than before. Nana Shimura firm. Tell him I won't take over unless you're in real danger or you ask me to. Izuku repeated it carefully. Izuku Midoriya to Tashinori. She says she won't take over unless I'm in real danger or unless I ask her to. Tashinori's eyes softened. Tashinori Yagi quiet. That sounds like her. For a moment, nobody said anything. The muffled roar of the stadium continued behind the walls. Then Tashinori let out a small breath. Tashinori Yagi gently. Still, we should talk after the festival. Yumi, Aizawa, and Principal Nizu. Izuku nodded quickly. Izuku Midoriya serious. Yes, sir. Tashinori gave him a small smile. Tashinori Yagi kind. For now, recover and prepare for your next match. Izuku straightened a little. Izuku Midoriya nervous, but determined. Right? Tashinori turned to leave, then paused. He glanced back at Izuku. Tashinori Yagi softly. And young Midoriya? Izuku looked up. Izuku, Midoriya curious. Yes? Tashinori's smile became faint but real. Tashinori, Yagi, quiet. Tell her it was good to see her again. Izuku's expression softened. Inside his mind, Nana went quiet. Then she answered, not teasing this time. Nana, Shimura's soft. Tell him I'm proud of him. Izuku swallowed and looked at Tashinori. Izuku, Midoriya gentle. She says she's proud of you. Tashinori froze. His eyes lowered for a second. When he looked back up, his smile was small and shaky. Tashinori Yagi barely above a whisper. Thank you. Then he turned and walked down the hall, leaving Izuku standing there with a red face, a racing heart, and the strange feeling that his first tournament match had somehow become way more important than just winning. So, this was the end of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.